Chapter 1, Seaside City, at the exclusive interview with the enigmatic film emperor. As the journalist for this interview, I, Charlotte Hayes, couldn't hide the nervousness in my eyes. A staff member slowly pulled the door open, revealing a handsome man in a black casual suit standing in the doorway. The long-waiting fans suddenly erupted in screams, "Wow, it's the film emperor, Ethan Marshall." My eyes widened in shock, my racing heart feeling as if it had stopped dead. Ethan Marshall. All eyes were on him as he smiled, waved to his fans, and walked over. I stared blankly as he drew closer, feeling the air being squeezed from my lungs. Ethan Marshall was my secret husband. He soon sat down opposite me, his presence overwhelmingly powerful. His smiling dark eyes finally settled on my face, but they held an added layer of ice. It took me a long moment to pull myself together. I took a deep breath, trying my best to ignore our relationship as I exchanged pleasantries with him as if following a script. The back and forth of questions and answers lasted only 20 minutes, but it felt like 20 years. "Mr. Marshall, before we conclude the interview, I have a few more questions." I looked down, flipping through my question cards, and let out a quiet sigh of relief. It was almost over. But when I saw the last few questions on the cards, my heart sank, and the words caught in my throat once again. I looked up, forcing a difficult smile. "Your fans are very interested in your romantic life. May I ask, have you thought about being in a relationship recently?" Ethan gave a half smile. "I have." The moment he spoke, a wave of disappointed groans and excited squeals came from the fans below the stage. My heart trembled. "Then what's your ideal type?" Ethan glanced at the fans behind me, but his gaze ultimately returned to my face. He said slowly, "Simple and straightforward, not too strong, someone who can be playful and affectionate sometimes." It seemed like a normal answer, but every word was a dagger in my heart, because none of those descriptions applied to me. My eyes darkened, a flash of pain crossing them. A lump formed in my throat, making it hard to speak. "Inside or outside the entertainment industry, do you have someone in mind?" I watched Ethan, my wounded heart tightening as he hesitated. He averted his gaze and nodded. "Yes." In that instant, my heart felt like it had been plunged into an ice cellar, a bone-deep chill spreading through my entire body. When the interview ended, Ethan was the first to stand up. His eyes were cold. "Are all reporters of your caliber?" His words made my heart clench. I watched numbly as he was surrounded by his team and led away. Because I had zoned out several times during the interview, the editor chewed me out. But all I could think about were Ethan's answers. Bayside Villa. As soon as I entered the bedroom, the scent of minty smoke hit my nostrils. I looked over and saw Ethan sitting on the edge of the bed. Before I could speak, his gaze shot toward me like an arrow. "Didn't I tell you that I don't want to be seen with you in public?" Ethan said coldly. My heart tightened. I wanted to explain, but the words that came out were a powerless question instead. "If you don't love me, why did you marry me?" No one would have ever guessed that Ethan Marshall, a top-tier actor, had been married for 3 years and that his wife was an obscure, little-known journalist. But this marriage was a secret, hidden from the world. Besides our two families, only Ethan's agent, Laura Norton, knew. I bit my lower lip and lowered my head, a bitter taste rising in my heart. After a moment of silence, the sound of footsteps grew closer, along with a shadow. Suddenly, I felt my body lift as Ethan swept me into his arms. Before I could react, I was thrown heavily onto the bed. He pinned me down. I didn't resist, just silently endured the wetness in my eyes and his roughness. In the heated atmosphere, the man's warm breath ghosted over my ear. "A woman like you, who else would want you besides me?" Chapter 2, such heartless, cruel words sent a sharp pain through me, and hot tears almost spilled from my eyes. Over the past 3 years, I had explained it countless times. Yet Ethan still believed I was entangled with my former boss, Sela's Thorn. He even suspected that the child I had miscarried was Sela's. The bitterness in my heart was a story I could never tell the next day. When I woke up, Ethan was already gone. I knew he had left for a scheduled appearance. I sighed, my eyes filled with disappointment, and got up to wash. Just as I was about to leave for work, my mother-in-law, Eleanor Marshall, suddenly arrived. I looked at her at a loss. "Mom, what are you?" My words trailed off when I saw the innocent-looking young woman following behind her. Eleanor shot me a look and walked straight past me with the woman, sitting down. I'm here today mainly to discuss things between you and Ethan. I froze, a sense of dread washing over me. After your miscarriage, you haven't gotten pregnant again. If you can't have children, then someone else will. Eleanor's harsh tone sent a wave of sorrow through me. Ever since the miscarriage 3 years ago, I had not only lost my child, but my body had also been damaged, making it difficult to conceive again. A look of disgust colored Eleanor's eyes as she turned to the woman beside her. This is Penelope Croft. She graduated from a top university, and her looks and family background are leagues above yours. I instantly understood what Eleanor meant. Before I could speak, she added coldly, "If you're not willing, that's fine too. Get a divorce." A sharp pain pierced my heart. "Mom, you should ask Ethan about this." Eleanor let out a scornful laugh. "Think about it carefully. If it weren't for Ethan, do you think I would have ever let you into the Marshall family?" With that, she stood up and left with Penelope Croft. My eyes reddened. I took a deep breath to force the tears back. After a long while, I composed myself, ignored the ache in my chest, and left for work as if nothing had happened. Because the report on Ethan had generated good traffic, the company sent me to his film set for follow-up coverage. Chapter 3, his words were like a bucket of ice water poured over my head, so cold that my heart trembled. My outstretched hand hung in the air, looking ridiculous. Ethan paid, took the boxed ring, and turned toward the exit without giving me a second glance. Only after his figure had disappeared from the store did I manage to swallow the dull ache in my chest and chase after him. "Ethan," I asked, my voice hoarse. "Who is this she you're talking about?" Ethan sneered. "Just yesterday you asked if I had someone in mind. Why are you playing dumb today?" My heart clenched, and I was left speechless. I was still his wife. Even if he didn't love me, how could he humiliate me like this? By the time I tried to speak again, Ethan had already driven away. My hands, hanging at my sides, slowly tightened into fists. The sting in my nose made the corners of my eyes turn red. The next day, on the film set, I kept my distance as usual, afraid that another reporter might snap a picture of me and Ethan together. As dusk fell, I took the last few stills and was about to head back to the office when a crew member tapped me on the shoulder. "Are you free?" I was taken aback. I glanced at the busy people around me and hesitantly nodded. "Great. Go to the prop room and get the prop gun for Ethan's next scene," the crew member said, pointing in a direction. It was getting dark, and the prop room was in a remote, deserted area. I felt a twinge of regret, but Ethan needed it urgently, so I didn't overthink it. I entered the room and, using the light from outside, fumbled for the light switch. Suddenly, with a loud bang, the door slammed shut behind me. Startled, I rushed to open the door, only to find it locked from the outside. The prop room was small and had no windows. Panicked, I pounded on the door. "Is anyone there? Can you please open the door?" No one answered. I took out my phone, only to find it was dead. I hung my head in frustration. Tossing the phone back in my bag, I resigned myself to waiting for someone to come looking for props. But it wasn't long before the last sliver of light from under the door disappeared, and the chill of the night seeped in. I squatted against the wall, my body trembling uncontrollably. Outside, it remained dead silent. The combination of cold and exhaustion weighed on me. I fought to keep my eyes open, murmuring, "Ethan!" Suddenly, the locked door burst open with a loud crash. The blinding light made me instinctively squint. A familiar scent washed over me. I looked up to see Ethan Marshall standing right in front of me. His agent, Laura Norton, held up her phone, her voice low. "Finally found you. I'll keep people away. You two get out of here quickly." As she spoke, the light from her phone vanished as she left. Backlit by the dim light, I couldn't make out Ethan's expression. I stumbled to my feet and tried to explain. "I was trying to get your. What's the difference between you and a good-for-nothing?" Ethan's icy tone made my heart seize. After a few seconds of silence, he turned around, his voice colder than frost. "Even if you're looking to die, don't drag me into it." My breath caught. His retreating figure was like a red-hot knife plunging into my heart. I suddenly felt that Ethan was moving further and further away from me, so far that I might never be able to catch up. Fighting back the stinging in my eyes, I managed to say, "Ethan," he paused, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you expecting me to personally drive you home?" Hearing this, my eyelashes fluttered. In a trembling voice, I asked, "Can we go public? Please?" Chapter 4. The air seemed to freeze the moment the words left my lips. I clenched my trembling fists, the grievances in my heart surging like an unstoppable tide. Right now, I felt less like Ethan's wife and more like a disgraceful relative he had to hide. Besides, he didn't love me anymore. Why was he still tying me to him? After a long silence, Ethan finally spat out 4 cold words. "In your dreams." Just 4 words, but they hit me with such force that my legs went weak and I nearly collapsed. His retreating figure blurred in my vision. I quickly tilted my head back, wiped away the tears at the corners of my eyes, and bit down hard on my lip. Low whimpers filled the dark, narrow prop room. Outside the set, Ethan got into his car with a grim face and picked up a script from some scene, trying to read. But every line transformed into my voice, repeating, "Can we go public? Please." The words were like a curse, agitating him. A deep frustration darkened his eyes, and his hand tightened on the script. For several days, Ethan didn't come home. I never found out who had locked me in the prop room that day, but I didn't return to the set either. It wasn't until half a month later, when filming for the tryst wrapped, that I finally saw him at home again. I immediately felt uneasy, a sense of oppression filling the air. Ethan's gaze was fixed on the television. His voice was flat but carried a warning. "The wrap party press conference is in 4 days. I don't want to see you there." I gave a bitter smile. "I haven't been to the set in half a month. Do you still not trust me?" My words earned a derisive laugh from him. "I'm just afraid some people will do anything for money." My heart trembled, my throat tight. "Don't worry, I'll keep my word." With that, I went into the study. Forcing his taunts out of my mind, I finished writing my article. By then, night had fallen. I dragged my exhausted body to bed. Before I could even turn over, a pair of strong arms wrapped around my waist. The faint scent of minty smoke filled my nose, and his slightly heavy breathing tickled my ear. My heart skipped a beat. My voice was soft. "Ethan, I'm really tired." But my weak resistance was completely overwhelmed by his control. I bit my lip, enduring his repeated assaults. When I woke up again, the sun was bright. I pushed myself up, my body aching. The space beside me was empty and cold. A deep loneliness I couldn't hide filled my weary eyes. In our entire marriage, I had never once woken up to see him beside me. Lost in thought, the phone on the nightstand suddenly rang. I picked it up and saw Mom on the screen. My heart sank. "Mom, what's up?" On the other end, my mother, Brenda, launched into a tirade of complaints before, as usual, asking for money. "Mom," I said, my voice hoarse with utter helplessness and sorrow, "I really don't have any money left." I had sent my entire salary to my mother, but she always said it wasn't enough. Hearing this, Brenda started berating me for being unfilial. I don't know how long it went on before she finally hung up. I threw the phone aside and ran my slender fingers through my messy hair. Tears welled up, and the corners of my eyes reddened with hurt. I often wondered, if my father were still alive, if my mother had spared just a little of the love she gave my brother for me, would I not have to bottle everything up inside? 3 days later, at the press conference for the tryst, I sat in the back row, my feelings a tangled mess. I had reluctantly agreed to the editor's assignment for the bonus, but what would Ethan think? A bitter feeling rose in my chest. He would probably just mock me again. Before long, Ethan and several other actors from the film walked onto the stage. I stared, slightly stunned. Ethan wore a gentle smile, a stark contrast to the coldness he showed me. Right now, he looked like a perfect gentleman. A flicker of disappointment crossed my eyes. I slowly tightened my hands, unable to look away. The next moment, his gaze swept over the audience and met mine. The cold sarcasm in his eyes sent a chill through my heart. Just then, a reporter in the front row asked loudly, "Some fans say you and Serafina Vance, who plays the female lead, have great on-screen chemistry. Did either of you develop feelings for the other while filming?" I lowered my gaze, but couldn't help but listen closely for Ethan's answer. Even though I knew his response would likely hurt me, I still couldn't stop myself from caring. "Perhaps." Ethan's ambiguous answer made my heart clench. My tightly pressed lips trembled. Suddenly, a voice from behind me made my blood run cold. "Son-in-law," Chapter 5, that loud cry of "son-in-law" drew the attention of everyone present. I was dumbfounded, my pupils shrinking in disbelief. "Mom," I whipped my head around to look at Ethan on the stage. The smile on his face had completely vanished, replaced by a dark expression that was terrifying. Seeing Ethan on the stage dozens of feet away, my mother's face lit up, and she ran toward him. I scrambled from my seat to intercept her, but I was too late. Under the glare of dozens of cameras and television crews, my mother stood before Ethan Marshall. "Son-in-law, why haven't you and Charlotte been answering my calls?" She complained as if she were alone, completely oblivious to Ethan's ashen face. The host was also stunned by Brenda's sudden appearance. I stood frozen in place, paralyzed by the look in Ethan's eyes. I didn't know how my mother had found this place, but I knew Ethan was furious. "Charlotte," my mother suddenly pointed at me, her tone accusatory. "Since your son-in-law is here, and with all these people as witnesses, just give me a straight answer. Are you going to let your family starve or not?" In an instant, all the lenses turned to me. I didn't care about anything else. I braced myself and rushed over to grab my mother's arm, turning to bow to the crowd. "I'm so sorry, we've caused you all trouble." With everyone watching, I dragged my mother out through a service exit. In the deserted hallway, I let go of her hand. "What are you doing here?" I was angry, but more than that, I was confused. Without someone leading the way, it would have been impossible for my mother to find this place. My mother glared at me. "Afraid I'll embarrass you? Fine, you can disown me, but you can't stop me from acknowledging my son-in-law." Her words filled me with a growing sense of dread. This incident would undoubtedly be sensationalized by the media, and it would affect Ethan. "Mom," I said, swallowing the tightness in my chest, "you can't treat him as your son-in-law right now." My mother didn't understand, retorting irritably, "What are you talking about? He is my son-in-law. Why can't I acknowledge him?" I knew she wouldn't get it, and I couldn't explain it clearly. I could only take a bank card from my bag, shove it into her hand, and see her to the bus station. Only then did she reluctantly leave. By the time I was done, it was dark. Dragging my exhausted body home, I thought of the editors scolding and sighed repeatedly. And I had given the last of my money to my mother. I was now completely broke. I opened the door and had just stepped inside when my wrist was suddenly grabbed. I was shoved forcefully against the door with a thud. Ethan was inches away, his hands on my shoulders, trapping me between the door and his body. His eyes, which were not quite smiling, held a terrifying darkness. "Charlotte Hayes, I really underestimated you." My breath caught. "Let me explain. I honestly don't know how my mom—" A deeply sarcastic laugh cut me off, and more cold words spilled from his lips. "Your explanations are as worthless as you are." A sharp pain shot through my heart, and my fists clenched unconsciously. Ethan's face drew closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Are you that desperate for money? Or is this just your way of getting revenge because I won't go public with our relationship?" "It's not like that," I retorted, fighting back tears. After hearing his answer at the interview, I had given up any hope of the world knowing about us. And I truly had no idea about what happened today. Ethan's lips brushed against my earlobe as he spoke, word by word. "Then it was for money. Just like you did back then, when you chose to betray me and got pregnant with another man's child." My eyes widened in shock, and I choked out in grief and anger. "I didn't—" Ethan's tone turned glacial. "Then tell me, why were you in bed with Silas Thorne 3 years ago?" Chapter 6, his question dragged my memory back 3 years. Back then, Ethan wasn't as famous as he is now, and Silas Thorne was a senior executive at my company. At the company's anniversary party, I had a few drinks and went to a room to rest. When I woke up, I was in bed with Silas, but I remembered that nothing had happened between us that day. Ethan, however, refused to believe me. With tears in my eyes, I looked at the man before me. "I told you, would you believe me?" The tears glistening in my eyes agitated him. He recoiled as if in disgust, turned, and stormed upstairs, radiating fury. After the sound of a door slamming upstairs, I stood in the empty living room, my heart twisting in agony. After a long while, I raised a hand to wipe the tears from my eyes and went to the guest room. Over the next few days, I found my phone flooded with abusive text messages. A week later, the company fired me, citing that I had damaged their public image. The hateful messages and calls kept coming, so I finally turned off my phone and shut myself away at home. Another 3 days passed. Ethan still hadn't returned. I held my powered-on phone, my eyes flickering as I scanned through the sea of insulting messages, searching for something. When I reached the last message, the light in my eyes finally died. I laughed at myself. I was actually still hoping Ethan would show some concern for me. Just as I was about to put the phone down, it vibrated again. I glanced at it. It was a push notification from a social media site. The headline made my eyes widen. Ethan Marshall and Serafina Vance spotted entering a hotel. Together my fingers froze. I couldn't bring myself to click on the paparazzi video. Instead, I scrolled through the comments below. They were all saying how perfect the two were together, and many were cursing me. My eyes stung, and I turned off the phone. Now, even I felt that Ethan was on a pedestal I could never reach. I really wasn't worthy of him. After a while, I managed to compose myself. I forced myself to get up, telling myself I couldn't just stay at home. Doing so meant no income, and it would only make me constantly think about Ethan. I washed up, changed into a clean outfit, put on some light makeup, and went out. However, because of the scandal at the press conference, no media company would hire me. In the end, only a local TV station was willing to take me on as a field reporter. Walking home, I felt exhausted from hitting dead ends everywhere. A hint of confusion clouded my eyes. Was this the life I really wanted? At the villa's entrance, a black van made me stop in my tracks, a flicker of confusion in my eyes. That wasn't Ethan's car. Just as I was about to approach it, the door opened. Ethan got out, followed closely by Serafina Vance. I froze. Seeing me at the gate, a flash of surprise crossed Ethan's eyes, but it quickly returned to cold indifference. Serafina was the first to speak, raising a hand in greeting. "Aren't you that reporter from the other day? You live here." Her tone was flat, devoid of surprise, filled only with mockery and doubt. She clearly didn't think I could afford a house here. My lips parted slightly. My wandering gaze suddenly locked onto the ring on Serafina's right ring finger. A sharp pain shot through my heart. That was unmistakably the ring Ethan had bought when I was with him. The she he had been talking about was Serafina. "You should head back now." Ethan's voice broke through my thoughts. The gentleness in his tone was something I could only dream of now. Serafina smiled. "All right, see you at the Shoreline Hotel the day after tomorrow." As the van drove away, I forced a smile and managed to ask, "Is it her?" The hoarseness of my voice made Ethan frown. He looked up and saw my pale face, the redness in my eyes trying hard to hide something. An inexplicable heaviness settled in his chest. He didn't answer, simply turning to walk inside. "Ethan," I grabbed his wrist, my voice trembling with pain. "What is it that you hate so much about me?" Ethan's frown deepened, and he coldly pulled his hand away. As my hand fell empty, tears streamed down my face, landing silently on the cold ground. Suddenly, the phone in my hand vibrated twice. I sniffled, my nose congested, and glanced at the screen. In an instant, a long-forgotten fear rose from the depths of my heart. Chapter 7, it was a text from my boss from 3 years ago, Silas Thorne. "Darling, I'm back. The gift I sent you should have arrived. Don't forget to check it out." My heart pounded in my chest. I looked up, about to call out to Ethan, but saw that he had already picked up the small package by the wall. My jaw tightened, and my heart leaped into my throat. Ethan saw the name, Silas Thorne, next to the sender's address, and his face darkened. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a rage so intense it felt like he wanted to tear me to pieces, just like he was doing to the package. The package was ripped open, revealing an extremely sexy lingerie set. "Your old flame really can't forget you, can he?" Ethan's smile sent a chill down my spine. I shook my head numbly, at a loss for how to explain. Just then, my phone rang again. Before I could see who it was, Ethan snatched it from my hand and answered. "Hello, darling. Why'd it take you so long to answer? Did you get the gift I sent? I bought it just your size." Silas's flippant voice came through the speaker. I watched as the viciousness in Ethan's eyes deepened, and my heart plunged into a bottomless abyss. My mind went blank. I couldn't find a single word of defense. "Darling, see you tomorrow night, same old place." The call ended. Ethan's knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone. He clenched his jaw, squeezing each word out from between his teeth. "You two have a same old place." I shook my head frantically, desperately denying it. "No, we really don't." Before I could finish, my trembling arm was grabbed, and I was dragged into the house like a rag doll. In the dim room, with a thud, before I could even cry out in pain, Ethan was on top of me, pinning my body into the mattress. He gripped my chin, his star-like eyes glowing with a dangerous red tint. "What else do you have to explain?" Forced to tilt my head back, the tearing pain in my chest filled my eyes with tears. I knew my explanations had always been weak and powerless. Silas's words and actions made it impossible for me to defend myself. Hate filled Ethan's eyes. He ripped my clothes open and took me with a savage force devoid of any tenderness. I bit down hard on my lip, which was already bleeding, swallowing all my tears and whimpers. Just as my consciousness began to fade, the weight on me disappeared. After the sound of a door opening and closing, the dark space was filled with only my pained gasps. I clutched the sheets beneath me, my half-open eyes, brimming with crystalline tears, staring blankly at the ceiling. Every bruise on my body was a testament to Ethan's brutality and cruelty, but none of it could compare to the pain of the bloody wound in my heart. I didn't sleep all night. With bloodshot eyes, I went to the TV station. An administrator showed me to my desk. Just as I was about to turn on my computer, my phone screen lit up. I looked. It was another text from Silas Thorne. "Darling, you look so sexy today." My hand trembled and I almost dropped the phone. A look of panic crossed my face as I glanced around. Was Silas watching me? I spent the entire morning in a state of anxiety. After the lunch break ended, a colleague came over and knocked on my desk. "Charlotte Hayes, the director wants to see you in his office." I was stunned. I had only been here for half a day. Why would the director want to see me? Though I was confused, I didn't dare delay and immediately headed to his office. As I left, I could hear my other colleagues whispering about me. I lowered my gaze, trying my best to ignore their strange looks. Outside the office, I knocked and went in, stopping in front of the desk. "Director, you wanted to see me." The swivel chair that had its back to me slowly turned around. Under my horrified gaze, Silas Thorne curved his lips into a smile. "Long time no see, darling." Chapter 8. My breath caught in my throat. I instinctively took 2 steps back. "What are you doing here?" I never would have imagined that Silas Thorne, who had been abroad for 3 years, would be the director of a local TV station like this. Silas stood up and walked over to me with a smile, his hand reaching for my pale face. "You've lost a lot of weight. Have you been missing me?" I immediately turned my head away, my eyes filled with disgust. "What do you want?" My rejection didn't seem to anger him at all. He picked up a lock of my dark hair, his tone arrogant. "I want you." I froze. "Divorce Ethan Marshall and marry me," Silas said, looking at me, every word dripping with audacity. Rage welled up inside me. I turned and said coldly, "I'm sorry, but I don't think I'm suited for this job." Silas smiled. "Go ahead and walk out that door if you want to see the news of your secret marriage to Ethan Marshall on the front page." His words stopped me in my tracks. My legs felt cemented to the floor. He was threatening me. Seeing my hesitation, Silas strode back to me satisfied. He spoke gently, "Be good, and I won't make you run around chasing news stories like before." I frowned, my face impassive as I refused. "Thank you, but I can't accept." With that, I turned and left without a second glance. The smile on Silas's lips slowly faded. He sniffed the lingering fragrance on his palm, his eyes filled with a possessive certainty. When I came out of the office, I noticed that the whispers and pointing fingers had increased. I heard she used to be a paparazzi. Do you think she and the director have that kind of relationship? How else could someone with her qualifications get in here? The ugly words, filled with sarcasm, reached my ears. I fought back the hurt and bitterness in my heart and continued with my work. When it was time to leave, I left in a hurry, afraid Silas would use the opportunity to trouble me again. But as soon as I got home, before I could even catch my breath, a call came from Ethan's agent, Laura Norton. "Charlotte, what have you done? The news about you and Ethan has blown up all over social media." Laura's frantic and angry tone left me completely bewildered. She sighed heavily. "Just go see for yourself." The call ended. I quickly opened my social media app, and 2 viral trending topics made my blood run cold. The first, Ethan Marshall has been married for 3 years. The second, Ethan Marshall's secret wife cheated during the marriage. Hundreds of thousands of comments were flooding in, all cursing me. Some even wished death upon my entire family. My mind went completely blank. But I knew this had to be Silas's doing. His goal was to make Ethan's misunderstanding of me grow even deeper. With a loud bang, the front door was thrown open. Startled, I turned to see Ethan approaching, step by step, his presence suffocating. I scrambled to my feet, my lips moving stiffly. I didn't do this. The corners of Ethan's eyes were red with fury. His vicious gaze trapped me like a cage, and his voice sounded like it was coming from the depths of hell. If it wasn't you, was it that lover of yours? The term lover was dripping with sarcasm. A sharp pain pierced my heart, and my eyes reddened with hurt. Silas's harassment and the slander from my new colleagues had already pushed me to my limit. Was Ethan going to be the final straw that broke me? I could no longer find the words to defend myself. All I could do was say in a hoarse voice, "I will make a public clarification myself." My sincere words were met with his cold laugh. "Clarify? You want the whole world to know you cheated on me, or do you want to drag me down and make me as filthy as you are?" His words made my heart constrict violently. I looked at the man I had loved for so many years in shock, suddenly feeling like he was a complete stranger. When I tried to recall my memories of him from before, they were all blurry and indistinct. Ethan looked at my silent form, wishing the fire of jealousy inside him could burn me to ashes. My clenched fists slowly relaxed. My dim eyes held a hint of disappointment, and my slightly parted lips looked as if they were about to say something. "Charlotte Hayes." Ethan's voice suddenly became calm, cutting off whatever I was about to say. "How about you just disappear forever?" Chapter 9, my pupils constricted violently. My teetering heart felt as if it had been struck by a spiked mace, the pain so intense I could hardly breathe. I asked in a trembling voice, "What did you say?" Ethan's dark eyes were fixed on my pale face. The fire in his heart burned away the faint, almost imperceptible twinge of pain he felt. He turned away decisively, leaving behind a cold warning. "By the time I come back, I don't want to see a single thing of yours in this house." As his figure vanished completely, I collapsed weakly to the floor. My tear-filled, vacant eyes stared at the half-open door, but the sorrow in my heart was a raging sea, threatening to drown me. My vision blurred with tears. I covered my face with my hands, but the tears still streamed relentlessly through my fingers. Ethan's words, "How about you just disappear forever?" had hit me like a bomb, shattering me to pieces. Hoarse sobs gradually filled the empty hall. I felt like I had never been so helpless. The next day, taking advantage of the Sunday, I went back to the countryside. I dragged my exhausted body back to the place where I grew up. The small courtyard became my last refuge, and my heart, which was aching to the point of numbness, finally felt a flicker of warmth. Fighting back tears, I took a deep breath and entered the house. At least I still had a home and a family. The door to the main room was closed. Dried corn was laid out to dry in the yard. I walked over, about to push the door open, when I heard my mother, Brenda, and my younger brother, Vincent, talking. One of my clients bought an accident insurance policy for his son. Later, the son had an accident, and he got a payout of over $3 million, Vincent said excitedly. "That much?" Brenda's voice was filled with shock and envy. "Mom, I don't think my sister and brother-in-law are going to make it. Why don't we buy an insurance policy for her? That way, if something happens to her while she's out reporting, at least we won't be left with nothing," Vincent suggested, a calculating look in his eyes. Brenda laughed. "Easy for you to say. What could possibly happen to her?" Vincent raised an eyebrow and put down the melon seeds he was eating. "Didn't the TV say there's a typhoon in District 1? With my sister's personality, she's definitely going too." The conversation of my closest relatives seeped through the crack in the door and into my ears. I stood frozen, the hand I had raised to push the door feeling impossibly heavy. I looked up at the slightly glaring sun, but my heart felt completely devoid of warmth. This was my refuge, my family. After squeezing me dry, they now wanted to use my last breath to exchange for a fortune. My eyes reddened. They were too dry to produce tears, filled only with a profound bitterness. I lowered my head and sent a text message to Ethan. "If I disappeared, would you be happy?" Just as I sent it, the door in front of me suddenly opened. Vincent saw me standing outside, his expression changing. He gave a dry laugh. "Sis, when did you get back?" I looked up and forced a relaxed smile. "I just got back. I was about to go in when you opened the door." Vincent gave me a skeptical look, then glanced back at Brenda, giving her a look before heading to his own room. Once he was gone, Brenda immediately came over and took my hand affectionately, pulling me down to sit. "Charlotte, is your work tiring? Have you run into any trouble while reporting?" This uncharacteristic concern was like a knife twisting in my already wounded heart. I mechanically gave her the answers she wanted to hear. When the topic turned to insurance, a flicker of something like anticipation appeared in my dull eyes. Look at you, out there every day, you never know what might happen. Even if nothing happens, signing an insurance policy is a way to support your brother's work. We're family, after all, Brenda said, holding my hand and persuading me earnestly. As soon as she finished speaking, I felt my phone vibrate. I quickly opened it. Yes. A single word, completely extinguishing the light in my eyes. I curved my lips into a smile of utter despair. I'll sign. Chapter 10, after signing the insurance policy, I didn't stay. I took a bus straight back to the city. As dusk fell, the warm yellow streetlights outside the villa brought me no sense of warmth or home. I looked at the house before me, hot tears gradually filling my eyes. What was the difference between me and an orphan now? In fact, many orphans probably lived much happier lives than I did. I entered the house. The first thing I heard was the news anchor on TV reporting on the typhoon. Then, I smelled the faint scent of minty smoke. Ethan was watching the TV, his tone as cold as winter snow. Did you just ignore what I said? I clutched the hem of my shirt, my voice choked. I'll pack right now. With that, I dragged my heavy legs upstairs. A few minutes later, I came down with my suitcase, my slow steps pausing at the entryway. I turned and looked at Ethan. He never once looked at me. His profile was as cold and indifferent as if he were looking at a complete stranger. Ethan, I asked softly, fighting back tears. Can I hear you sing The End of Wandering one more time? Chapter 11, the TV replayed the footage from District 1, but the person who had just disappeared was no longer there. Ethan's stunned body trembled faintly, a rising tide of terror churning in his dark eyes. Ignoring the shattered glass of the patio door, he frantically searched for the phone he had tossed aside in his frustration. He found it under the coffee table. Opening the contacts, the name, Charlotte Hayes, made his heart suddenly clench. His bloodshot eyes stared at the name he had once despised so much. She'll be okay, right? His stiff fingers pressed the call button. The few seconds it took to connect felt like half a lifetime. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed down an unbearable wave of emotion. The wind carried the automated reply from the phone to his ear. The user you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please try again later? Ethan's eyes went vacant. It was the most normal of messages, but right now, it sounded like Charlotte's death notice. His hand fell limply to his side, and the phone, now disconnected, clattered to the floor again. Meanwhile, at the Hayes residence, Vincent saw the news anchor continue the broadcast without a change in expression and hastily put out his cigarette. His chest heaved with rapid breaths. He dialed the number saved as Sis. For a few seconds, he could hear his own heart pounding, feeling like it was about to burst from his chest. Sorry, the user you have dialed is currently unavailable. The mechanical female voice came through his earphones. Vincent froze, and it took him a moment to force a twitch of a smile. He immediately tossed the phone aside and began to frantically rummage through the messy room. Finally, in a cluttered drawer, he found the personal accident insurance policy signed with the name Charlotte Hayes. Vincent's lips curled into a grin. He let out a few choked laughs, his slightly reddened eyes glistening with tears. His sister was dead. Besides the insurance money, he would also get compensation from the TV station. He wiped his face forcefully, picked up his phone, and made another call. Hello, Mom. Vincent's hoarse voice held a trace of joy. Something's happened to Sis. A sharp intake of breath came from the other end. After a long pause, Brenda's trembling voice asked, Is it that typhoon thing you mentioned? How is she? Vincent glanced at the TV and said, word by word, She's most likely not going to make it. The typhoon raged for 3 days before finally subsiding, but the search and rescue efforts in District 1 continued. The rescue team looked at the bodies of those who hadn't evacuated in time, their eyes red with sorrow. Captain, a team member squatting at the entrance of an alley, urgently waved to Captain Harris. There's a survivor, the captain immediately ran over. A girl, wrapped in a mud-caked blue raincoat, was lying on the ground. Her forehead and neck were covered in sticky, wet blood. The captain yelled, Quick, get a stretcher, take her to the nearest hospital. At his command, 2 team members rushed over with a stretcher and carefully lifted the girl onto it. Just as the captain was about to tell them to be careful, he noticed a work ID in the pool of blood. He picked it up and wiped off the blood and mud. Charlotte Hayes? The captain was taken aback. This girl, Charlotte Hayes, was a reporter. He stood up and watched as she was carried into the ambulance, letting out a sigh of relief. Fate hadn't been too cruel after all, not letting such a brave girl die here. Before it got dark, the captain had someone contact the TV station where Charlotte worked. When Silas Thorne learned that Charlotte had been taken to the District 1 hospital for emergency treatment, he immediately drove over. He stared at the rain-streaked windshield, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Whether Charlotte lived or died, he was going to make sure Ethan Marshall got a good taste of what it felt like to be condemned by the world. Chapter 12. In just a few days, the news about Ethan Marshall and Charlotte Hayes on social media had nearly overshadowed the typhoon itself. Laura Norton was fielding over 20 calls a day. She felt like her lips were about to peel off. Even though she had already canceled all of Ethan's engagements for the month, interview requests kept pouring in. She had just hung up with the PR department and hadn't even had a chance to breathe when the hospital called. "Hello," she said, rubbing her aching head, her voice full of exhaustion. "Miss Norton, Mr. Marshall is awake." Hearing this, the impatience in Laura's eyes instantly turned to joy. "He's awake? Great, great, I'll be right there." She put her phone in her bag and rushed to the hospital. On the way, Laura couldn't stop sighing. She had tried to contact Ethan as soon as she heard about Charlotte's accident. She couldn't understand why Charlotte would go to such a dangerous place. But Ethan hadn't answered his phone. By the time she got to his house, he had already been unconscious for who knows how long. Thinking about Charlotte, whose fate was still unknown, and the public opinion swirling on social media, the veins on Laura's forehead throbbed. Hospital, VIP ward. Laura hurried into the room and saw that Ethan was already sitting up. The weight in her chest finally lifted. She walked over and collapsed onto the sofa. "You're finally awake. You almost developed pneumonia." Ethan's dark eyes were fixed on the rain outside the window, his entire being seeming to drift outside of his own consciousness. Seeing his expression, Laura's heart sank. "Ethan, about Charlotte, has the typhoon stopped?" Ethan suddenly asked, his voice as hoarse as an old man's. "It has," Laura replied, taken aback and looking at him in confusion. A flicker of light crossed Ethan's downcast eyes. "Oh." His calmness was what made Laura uneasy. She had expected him to at least be anxious to find Charlotte, even if he didn't cry. But he did neither. "Are you okay?" she asked tentatively. Ethan slowly shook his head and reached for the phone on the nightstand. His cold fingertips pressed the green call button, and he held the phone to his ear. "Hello, the user you have dialed is..." With a beep, Ethan pressed the end call button and placed the phone back where it was. He closed his bloodshot eyes and took a few shallow breaths, trying to calm the pain that was slowly welling up in his chest. The signal in District 1 is unstable right now. It's normal that the call won't go through. With that thought, he waited until the wetness in his eyes had nearly disappeared before opening them again. Just as Laura was about to ask him something, the phone Ethan had just put down suddenly rang. In an instant, he had snatched it up, a flicker of hope in his eyes vanishing as quickly as it appeared. "Hello," he said, his voice returning to its usual coldness, even with a hint of distance. "Brother-in-law." Vincent Hayes's voice sounded exceptionally grating at that moment. Ethan's face darkened. He clearly disliked being called brother-in-law by him. It wasn't the title he disliked, but the person saying it. "What is it?" Ethan's eyes filled with impatience, as if he were about to hang up at any second. Vincent got straight to the point. "Have you and my sister divorced?" The question was like a knife severing the taut string in Ethan's mind. Seeing his expression change so drastically, Laura couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Ethan didn't speak, but Vincent continued casually, "Did something happen to her? Are you happy about it?" Ethan retorted with a sneer. "I'm happy for you," Vincent laughed. "A public figure like you must be very busy. How about this? You give me that villa you and my sister own, and I'll make sure our families stay out of each other's business for good." Chapter 13, listening to those shameless words, Ethan's anger turned into a cold laugh. "And if I refuse," a tusk came from the other end of the line, "that's fine too. I'm just afraid that if the media comes looking for me, I might not be able to control this mouth of mine." Before Vincent could finish, Ethan had already hung up. Seeing his face as black as ink, Laura asked again, "Who was that?" "A thug who only knows how to ask for money," Ethan replied, contempt dripping from his every word. He gripped his phone tightly, finding Vincent's behavior increasingly strange. When he mentioned that something had happened to Charlotte, his tone was clearly excited. Ethan's eyes darkened. Could it be that Charlotte's relationship with her family was really that cold? Something had happened to her, and not only did her brother show no concern, he was even threatening him for a house. Ethan glanced at the IV needle in the back of his hand and, to Laura's surprise, pulled it out. "What are you doing now?" Laura was completely bewildered by his actions over the past 15 minutes. "There's no signal in District 1, so she can't answer her phone. I'll go myself," Ethan said, putting on his shoes and heading for the door. Laura knew she couldn't stop him, so she had no choice but to drive him home to change his clothes first. The villa. The living room was still a mess, and now it felt desolate. Ethan's heart tightened. He glanced at the shattered patio door and went upstairs. As soon as he opened the bedroom door, a faint, sweet fragrance washed over him. His aching heart seemed to find some solace, calming slightly, yet he found it difficult to step inside. He looked at the neatly tidied room and felt a hollow emptiness inside. With a tense expression, he walked in with heavy steps. Swallowing the oppressive feeling, Ethan took some clothes from the closet. A piece of paper on the nightstand, held down by a pen, caught his eye. He narrowed his phoenix eyes and picked it up. It was a handwritten divorce agreement, and on the line for the wife's signature, the name Charlotte Hayes was already signed. The elegant handwriting was like a series of needles piercing his heart. His fingertips trembled, and he nearly crumpled the thin piece of paper. Charlotte wanted to divorce him. Ethan looked up, blinked away the stinging in his eyes, and tossed it aside. "In your dreams." Outside. Sitting in the car, Laura saw Ethan come out and handed him a mask and a hat. "Going like this probably won't help you find her. Let's go to the TV station and ask about the situation first." Ethan took them and gave a quiet Laura drove, glancing at him in the rearview mirror, and sighed with some regret. Ethan was currently in the eye of the storm. The paparazzi were desperate to dig up every detail about him and Charlotte. Going to the TV station or District 1 now would be, lost in their own thoughts, they soon arrived at the TV station. To be safe, Laura had Ethan wait in the car while she went inside to ask around. Ethan looked at his reflection in the car window and curved his lips into a small smile. He was trying to figure out what his attitude should be when he saw Charlotte again. Anger, joy, annoyance, or the same cold indifference as before. But no matter which expression he tried, they all felt fake and ugly. Ethan couldn't help but laugh at himself. He, a Film Emperor Award winner, couldn't even manage a simple expression. It was beyond ridiculous. He lowered his head and looked at the last text message Charlotte had sent him. "If I disappeared, would you be happy?" And below it was his simple reply, "Yes." Ethan's eyes darkened, and he felt a sudden urge to retract that answer. Charlotte had disappeared. Was he really happy? Just then, a beaming Laura ran back, holding an umbrella. She got into the car, and while fastening her seatbelt, she said, "Charlotte's alive. She's in the District 1 hospital." Chapter 14. Laura started the car, instinctively glancing at the rearview mirror. That one glance nearly made her slam the clutch instead of the accelerator. She stopped the car again and turned to look at Ethan, whose eyes were red. "This is good news. Why are you crying?" Ethan stared out the window, his voice low and hoarse. "Just drive." Seeing that he didn't want to talk, Laura didn't press him, instead mentally planning their next steps. The relationship between Charlotte and Ethan could no longer be hidden. If this wasn't handled well, Ethan's public image would take a serious hit. At that thought, Laura's joy instantly turned to worry. Due to the typhoon, many roads were blocked. After 5 detours and 3 hours of driving, they finally arrived at the District 1 hospital. Night had fallen, but the rain showed no signs of letting up. Intensive care unit. Looking through the window, Ethan froze on the spot. His constricted pupils were fixed on Charlotte, who was surrounded by all sorts of medical equipment. Her entire head was wrapped in gauze, and an oxygen mask covered most of her face. Her chest rose and fell faintly in time with the beeping of the heart monitor. Ethan's hands, hanging at his sides, trembled slightly, and his breathing seemed to slow in sync with the person inside. Excessive blood loss led to a lack of oxygen to the brain, The doctor beside them sighed. Laura was stunned. Doctor, will she be in a vegetative state? Ethan's jaw tightened, and he finally turned his gaze to the doctor. The doctor shook his head. No, but there will be severe aftereffects. Her cognitive function will likely be impaired. Ethan's heart jolted. Can she recover? This type of brain damage is irreversible. The chances of recovery are very slim. The doctor's words were another harsh blow to Ethan's heart. He looked at Charlotte, a crystalline sheen forming in the corners of his reddened eyes. When she wakes up, will she have forgotten the past? Will she even forget him? After exchanging a few more words with the doctor, Laura patted Ethan's shoulder. Try to look on the bright side. At least Charlotte is still alive. After a moment of silence, Ethan's hoarse voice slowly emerged from his dry throat. Transfer her. We can't, Laura immediately refused. Your relationship with Charlotte is still unclear to the public. The paparazzi are relentless, and it was already a huge risk coming here. While she understood Ethan's feelings, her primary duty was as his agent. Even if she agreed, the company wouldn't. Ethan was the company's star artist. They would never let him be dragged down by this. Then I'll stay here, Ethan said coldly. Laura frowned. You don't have any scheduled activities this month, but can you guarantee that Charlotte will wake up within the month? Ethan took off his mask, his face tense. I'm staying here. He wasn't leaving. He was going to wait for Charlotte to wake up. If she explained what happened between her and Silas Thorne that year one more time, he would believe her. A sharp pain pricked Ethan's heart, but it felt agonizing. Seeing that he was determined to stay, Laura had no choice but to step aside and call the company to try and buy him some time. In a service stairwell, Silas Thorne's dark eyes stared intently at Ethan's unmoving back. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Vincent. Mr. Thorne. Vincent's voice was full of excitement. What can I do for you? Silas looked away and walked to the staircase railing. You may not be able to get your sister's insurance payout, but I can give you $2 million. First, though, you have to do a few things for me. Chapter 15, Laura called her assistant, Wendy Hughes, over, instructing her to look after Ethan before rushing back to the company for a meeting. Wendy, carrying several bags, sat with Ethan outside the ICU. She glanced down the quiet hallway and let out a quiet sigh of relief. It was a good thing they were in a hospital. Otherwise, who knows how many paparazzi would have gotten a shot. She turned to look at Ethan. His eyes were so red they looked like they might bleed, yet he continued to stare through that window. Wendy opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. She wanted to offer some comfort, but if Laura couldn't persuade him, what could she do? Besides, she knew Ethan's personality. It was better not to waste her breath. Ethan got up and walked to the window, his gaze fixed on Charlotte's closed eyes. His own dry eyes began to blur, but the face behind the glass became clearer and clearer. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. The scent of disinfectant in the air took him back to the two most memorable years of his life. The first time was his sophomore year of college, when a car accident left him with a fractured leg. After 2 days in the hospital, a girl with a fractured left arm was admitted to his room. That girl was Charlotte Hayes. She had greeted him with a blush that day, later telling him she had broken her arm falling off her bike. After listening, he had only said 2 words. So clumsy. Ethan stared at Charlotte, who seemed so small in the hospital bed, and his eyes grew warm. But remembering her smile from that year, he couldn't help but curve his own lips. Until 3 years ago, when their relationship crumbled like a collapsing building. Ethan, who had been in a recording session, heard that Charlotte had fallen and rushed to the hospital immediately. He was worried sick the entire way because Charlotte was pregnant with their child. But when he arrived, the baby was gone. Before he could even process it all, Silas Thorne sent him a text with a photo. In the photo, Silas had his arm around Charlotte as they lay in bed together, looking intimate and ambiguous. Below it was a line of text that nearly drove Ethan mad with rage. Thank you, anniversary party, for letting me have you. When Charlotte woke up again, not only was her child gone, but she was about to lose Ethan's love as well. The sound of hurried footsteps pulled Ethan from his thoughts. A nurse holding a syringe entered the room, checked on Charlotte's condition, and injected the medication into the hanging IV bag. When the nurse came out, Ethan suddenly asked, "How is she?" The nurse was taken aback. The tall man before her was wearing a mask and a baseball cap, and his voice was hoarse. She didn't recognize him as Ethan Marshall at first. She just found it strange that the man who had been visiting the past 2 days didn't seem to be this one. Her condition is stable. Don't worry, the nurse said before hurrying off. Ethan's expression froze, unsure whether to feel happy or worried. Elsewhere, Vincent saw Silas hand him a bank card. Without a second thought, he took it and stuffed it into his pocket. "Mr. Thorne, what do you need me to do? Should I have my mom go to Ethan's filming location again?" Vincent asked with a fawning smile. Silas smiled. "He probably won't be appearing in front of any cameras this month." He paused for a few seconds before continuing. "There's $700,000 on that card I just gave you. As long as you do what I ask, I'll transfer the rest of the money to this card immediately." Hearing about so much money, Vincent nodded his head vigorously. "Just tell me what to do." Silas leaned in and whispered a few words in his ear before pulling back. "Once this is done, I'll give you another $500,000. As for your sister, I'll take care of her." Hearing this, Vincent patted his chest. "Don't worry, I may not have many skills, but I've got a big mouth." Satisfied, Silas left. Once he was gone, Vincent immediately took out the silver gray card, kissed it twice, and started making a call. "Hello, Mom, get into the city and come to my place right away." "What for?" "I haven't finished my work yet." Vincent scoffed. "What work? From now on, we're going to be rich." Chapter 16. Laura, having just left the company, looked up at the sky. Seeing that it wasn't dark yet, she decided to head to District 1 to check on Ethan. But she had just gotten into the car, not even having fastened her seatbelt when her phone rang. Laura quickly picked it up. It was Lee from the PR department. She frowned. "Hello, what is it?" "Laura, this is really bad." Lee, who was usually very composed, sounded so frantic that Laura's expression changed. "What's wrong?" "Check social media." Someone claiming to be Charlotte Hayes' brother popped up out of nowhere and posted a long article. "The studio's DMs are about to explode. Hold on. I'll call you back." The moment Laura heard Charlotte Hayes' brother, she knew it was serious trouble and quickly hung up. She opened the social media app. Sure enough, the top trending topic about the typhoon had been pushed down by Charlotte Hayes' brother. Vincent Hayes had posted a long, rambling article. It detailed everything from how Ethan and Charlotte met, to their relationship and their marriage. The miscarriage and Ethan's insistence on a secret marriage were described in the most detail. Suddenly, Charlotte, the supposed adulterer, was transformed into a pitiful victim oppressed by her husband. In the comments, some people were just there for the drama, some fans were defending Ethan, and others were demanding he come forward and clarify. Laura's anger flared. She slammed her hand on the steering wheel. Is this Vincent Hayes insane? Isn't this a blatant attempt to destroy Ethan? However, she couldn't find any way to refute his claims. After all, they were all hard facts. She had been against Ethan's decision to have a secret marriage from the start. She never thought it would actually blow up like this. Not daring to delay, Laura rushed to the District 1 hospital. To her dismay, the area around the inpatient building was swarmed with reporters. The hospital had no choice but to call the police. Amid the chaos, Laura could only call Wendy Hughes and tell her to make sure no one got a picture of Ethan. Outside the ICU, Wendy nervously watched the hallway, afraid someone would rush out and start snapping photos of Ethan. Meanwhile, Ethan was staring blankly at the article Vincent had posted. He demanded that Charlotte hide their marriage. He demanded that she not appear with him in public. He demanded that she not bother him with her family's problems. So many unfair conditions had confined Charlotte, making her like a servant, humbled to the bone. Ethan stared, his slightly parted lips trembling as if murmuring something. At that moment, he didn't feel that Vincent was despicable, but rather that he himself was ridiculous. He had treated Charlotte so unfairly, so what was he doing now, standing guard here day and night? Was he waiting for her explanation? Or was he here to repent? Ethan looked up at the window he had been staring at for 2 whole days, a trace of confusion in his weary, pain-filled eyes. He had confirmed that Charlotte was alive. When she woke up, how should he face her? "Excuse me, you can't go in there." Wendy's voice pulled Ethan's wandering thoughts back. He turned and his eyes immediately darkened. The familiar fire of jealousy once again burned in his bloodshot eyes. Ethan stood up, his dark gaze landing like daggers on Silas Thorne, who was just a few steps away. "What are you doing here?" Silas glanced at the girl blocking his way and scoffed. I'm here to visit my injured subordinate, of course. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Subordinate? Charlotte was his subordinate? Wendy couldn't possibly stop Silas, who was a head taller than her. Hearing that Ethan seemed to know him, she didn't try to block him anymore and instead went back to the corner to keep watch. Silas walked to the window and placed a hand on the glass, as if gently caressing Charlotte's face. If the treasure you hold so dear ended up like this, would your heart ache? Chapter 17, his words seemed to burn away the last shred of Ethan's rationality. His expression turned fierce, and he grabbed Silas by the collar. I forgot, you probably don't have a heart. Silas showed no anger, but his face and eyes were filled with utter mockery. He broke free from Ethan's grip and straightened his collar and sleeves. How about we make a bet on what she'll be like when she wakes up? Ethan clenched his jaw, his fists cracking. Silas glanced at him before his gaze returned to Charlotte's face, the contempt in his eyes instantly replaced by obsession. When she wakes up, she'll forget you, forget everything from the past. She'll become as innocent and lovely as a child. As he spoke, a hint of a smile entered his voice. She'll live a better, happier life than before. Ethan's heart jolted, but he let out a sneer. Don't forget, she and I are husband and wife. Silas lowered his hand and turned to face him, his gaze as cold as ice. Weren't you bothered by the fact that she was pregnant with my child? That single sentence struck a nerve. He was bothered by it, very much so, but no matter how bothered he was, he had never let go. He had even married her. Are you so sure that child was yours? Ethan retorted coldly. Silas feigned confusion, frowning. Isn't that what you've always believed? Every word he spoke seemed to pierce Ethan's deepest wounds. Ethan's smile froze and his throat felt dry. All these years, he had believed that child was Silas's, but if it hadn't been for that text message from Silas, he wouldn't have. In the end, you only care about yourself, Silas said, his eyes narrowing. Big star, you should probably think about how you're going to explain this to your millions of fans. With that, he took one last, long look at Charlotte and turned to leave. Around the corner, Wendy saw Silas leave, but Ethan remained standing there, motionless. She walked over. Before she could speak, Ethan suddenly reached up and took off his mask and baseball cap. Hey, that! Wendy instinctively looked around, confused as to why he suddenly seemed so dejected. Ethan sat down wearily, clutching the cap and mask, his head in his hands. Silas's questions were like a sledgehammer striking his heart, yet he had no room to argue. Perhaps he didn't even have the right to argue. Ethan's brow furrowed tightly. He closed his eyes, a sense of exhaustion and defeat pressing down on him like a mountain. Brenda Hayes, who had been hastily summoned to the city by Vincent, had just finished tidying up the cramped rental unit when Vincent returned. She rubbed her sore back and complained, "Did you call your mother here just to be your maid?" Vincent, looking pleased, took a sip of water. "Mom, don't bother cleaning too much. I guarantee, in less than a week, we'll be moving into a big villa." "What?" Brenda thought he was talking nonsense. "Your sister isn't dead, and we don't have any money." "What big villa are you talking about?" Vincent flopped onto the sofa like a king. "Not being dead doesn't mean we won't get any money." He crossed his legs, thinking happily about how the stocks he bought today had gone up again. With money making money here, and at least another $1 million to get from Silas, plus a house from Ethan, by his calculations, a good life wasn't far off. Vincent shot up and had his mother sit down. "Mom, listen. Tomorrow, we're going to do a live stream. You need to make our family and my sister sound as miserable as possible." He would then add a few comments about how heartless Ethan was, and half the job would be done. Brenda knew nothing about this. Vincent simply took out a thick stack of cash and slapped it on the table. "Just do as I say." Brenda's eyes widened at the sight of the money. She snatched it up and agreed repeatedly. Chapter 18. Ethan spent another night sitting in the chair. He woke before dawn and instinctively walked to the window to look at Charlotte. She was just as the nurse had said, in stable condition. Laura, who had also been keeping watch, woke up drowsy and offered some advice. "The doctor said she won't wake up anytime soon, but she's not in danger. Don't worry so much." She yawned, the sleepiness receding slightly. Ethan didn't answer. His handsome face was haggard from lack of rest. He knew Charlotte wouldn't wake up soon, but he still wanted to see her. It was as if just looking at her could bring a sliver of comfort to his restless heart. Laura glanced at Wendy, who was still sound asleep on the opposite side, and stood up to stretch her stiff body. I'll go book you a room at a nearby hotel. Go get some rest, she said. Knowing Ethan would refuse, Laura quickly added, even if it's not for yourself, think about Charlotte. If she wakes up and sees you like this, will she feel any better? Ethan's eyes widened slightly. After a long moment, he looked at Charlotte reluctantly. Tell me when she wakes up. Don't worry. Before dawn, Laura took Ethan to a hotel and then returned to the hospital. She stretched, suddenly feeling like she had gone from being an agent to a full-time nanny. But when she thought of Charlotte, she felt both sympathy and heartache. Brenda and Vincent hadn't even called, let alone visited. The TV station was the same. Charlotte had been injured on the job, a work-related injury, yet not a single person had come to offer their condolences. But on second thought, maybe it was better that no one came. Otherwise, it wouldn't be convenient for Ethan to be here. Just after 9 o'clock, Laura, as usual, scrolled through social media to see if there was any new news about Ethan and Charlotte. The PR department had managed to suppress most of it, but the discussions in their fan communities were only intensifying. She rubbed her throbbing temples. Just as she was about to close the app, a live stream on her feed made her heart sink. It was Vincent Hayes. Laura quickly clicked on it. Just then, Brenda sat down in front of the camera. A chill ran down her spine. What were this mother and son up to now? In the live stream, Vincent first accused Ethan of being heartless, but he was quickly berated by some fans. However, when he brought up the secret marriage, the tide of public opinion clearly shifted. My father passed away early. My sister was 6 and I was only 3. My mom raised us all by herself, Vincent said, wiping away tears. When my sister and Ethan started dating, my mom and I were against it because our family is poor and can't compare to the Marshalls. Listening to this, Laura's anger boiled over. But Ethan promised to treat my sister well, but we never expected. Vincent's expression changed to one of righteous indignation. A few cleverly worded provocations, combined with Brenda's crying on the side, and the comments section was filled with people cursing Ethan. Especially regarding the press conference for the tryst and the subsequent accusations of Charlotte's infidelity. At the time, everyone thought Charlotte was deliberately creating drama. They never imagined the real wolf was Ethan. Laura had a bad feeling. At this rate, not only would his postponed schedules be canceled, but the tryst, which was set to release during the holidays, would probably be boycotted. And just as she thought it, comments about the movie, The Tryst, started appearing. Laura quickly exited the app and sent Ethan a text telling him not to leave the hotel. She walked to the window and looked at the unconscious Charlotte, feeling a long-forgotten sense of exhaustion. This had really blown up. The only person who could come forward and clear things up was Charlotte, but the doctor's words had essentially shattered that one hope. Laura clutched her phone tightly, murmuring, "Charlotte, you can't let your mom and brother destroy him." Chapter 19, the rich aroma of coffee and the gentle music made Silas Thorne's mood even better. He took off his headphones, distancing himself from the sound of Brenda's weeping. He took a sip of his Americano and let out a satisfied sigh. He hadn't expected Vincent to be such a good talker, and Brenda's performance of misery was quite convincing. Silas checked the topic's discussion level. Viral was no longer enough to describe it. The people who had once clamored to condemn Charlotte had now completely shifted their target to Ethan. There were even calls to boycott all his works and for him to get out of the entertainment industry. Silas chuckled, wondering what Ethan's expression would be if he saw all this. 2 hours later, Vincent ended the live stream. He coughed, his throat dry, and took a few breaths. Seeing that his mother was still crying, he said, "Mom, stop crying. No one's watching anymore." Hearing this, Brenda quickly wiped her face with a handkerchief. "Is it over?" Vincent didn't answer. He grabbed his phone and ran into his room to make a call. A few seconds later, the other end picked up. "Mr. Thorne," Vincent said with a triumphant smile, "you did a good job." "I've already transferred $1 million, Silas said after a moment. "The last thing you need to do is get Ethan to initiate the divorce." Hearing this, Vincent made another promise. "Is that all? Don't worry, leave it to me." After hanging up, he felt that Silas was making a mountain out of a molehill. Charlotte was unconscious, and even if she woke up, she'd probably be like an idiot. Why would Ethan want someone like that? District 1 Hospital. Wendy glanced at Laura, who was on the phone with the PR department a few meters away, and sighed. She walked to the window and looked at Charlotte in the bed, muttering to herself, "If she doesn't wake up, how much more trouble is going to happen?" Perhaps it was a coincidence, but as soon as she finished speaking, she saw the long lashes, still as a butterfly's folded wings, tremble. A pair of vacant dark eyes half-opened, staring at the ceiling. Wendy's mouth fell open in surprise. She stared for nearly 10 seconds before running over to call Laura. "Laura, she's awake," Laura, who had been scowling, was taken aback. "Charlotte's awake?" Wendy nodded. "Well, go get the doctor and nurses." Laura hastily ended her call and rushed to the window, looking anxiously at Charlotte on the bed. Her eyes were still half open, her gaze empty and confused. Right now, she looked more like a puppet that could only breathe. The attending physician and nurses arrived. Wendy looked at Laura and asked, "Should we tell Ethan?" Laura nodded twice, then stopped abruptly, her expression serious. "Don't tell him for now. It'll be trouble if there are still reporters squatting outside." Hotel room. Ethan, who had been sound asleep, suddenly jolted as if waking from a nightmare. He sat up, wiped the fine sweat from his forehead, and panted slightly. His dark eyes were momentarily blurry. He instinctively looked at the other side of the bed. Empty, like a dream. He ran his long fingers through his dark hair, tilted his head back, and frowned. The room was large, but he felt a suffocating sense of oppression. After dreaming about his past with Charlotte, that feeling had only intensified. "Charlotte," Ethan opened his eyes and picked up his phone to check it. It wasn't even noon yet. There was a text from Laura. She told him not to leave the hotel for the time being. Ethan's gaze deepened. Although he hadn't checked social media these past few days, he knew his situation was likely the most discussed topic. And there was probably no shortage of criticism. Ethan turned off his phone and threw back the covers, getting out of bed. After getting ready, he put on only a mask and left the hotel. Chapter 20. Outside the hospital room, Laura watched as the doctor examined Charlotte. She stared intently at Charlotte's eyes. The half-open eyes would occasionally blink slowly, but there was no other expression. Why isn't there any reaction? Laura rubbed her hands together anxiously, feeling that Charlotte's condition was far more serious than the doctor had predicted. When the doctor came out, she immediately asked, "Doctor, how is she?" As she spoke, she glanced at Charlotte again, who still looked completely unresponsive. The doctor, hands in his white coat pockets, frowned. "Her nervous system has suffered irreversible damage. In the future," Laura grew anxious. "Why do these doctors always have to be so vague? What will happen in the future?" The doctor said. "Her consciousness is still not very clear. In the future, she will have to rely on her family's companionship and treatment. If we can minimize the aftereffects, she should be able to take care of herself." Laura and Wendy were both stunned. So, until the aftereffects were minimized, Charlotte couldn't even take care of herself. Laura's face fell. Family's companionship? Would Vincent and Brenda have the patience to take care of Charlotte? Besides them, there was only Ethan. But Ethan was a celebrity. Most of his time belonged to the company. How could he possibly be there to support Charlotte? Laura looked at Charlotte, who had closed her eyes again, and her own eyes reddened. Just a few minutes after the doctor left, Ethan arrived. "What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you not to come out?" Laura said, looking fearfully behind him. Ethan took off his mask and looked at Charlotte in the room. "How is she?" Wendy was about to answer, but was silenced by a sharp look from Laura. "Same as before," she said, turning her head to avoid Ethan's suspicious gaze. After being Ethan's agent for years, she knew his personality. His situation with Charlotte was already chaotic thanks to Vincent's meddling. If he found out about Charlotte's condition now, there was no telling he wouldn't try to terminate his contract with the company. Ethan looked away, not calling out Laura's lie, and simply walked over to a chair and sat down. He opened his social media app. In just a few days, he had lost nearly 70,000 followers. His DMs were no longer filled with declarations of love and concern, but with abuse and ridicule. Among them were fans of Serafina Vance. They said he had dragged Serafina down with him, and that the box office for The Tryst was ruined. Ethan read through them all, his expression unchanging. But after reading each vile insult, he would remember what he had said to Charlotte. "How about you just disappear forever?" And his one-word reply, "Yes." The accusations of thousands couldn't compare to the single sliver of regret in his own heart. Laura sighed. "You have to face this situation. The company will prepare a press release for you later. Just post it as is." Ethan's gaze darkened. It was always like this. Whenever there was a scandal or some other issue, the company would send a press release and he would post it from his account. Half an hour later, the company sent over the press release. Ethan glanced at it. It basically said that Vincent had twisted the facts and that the secret marriage with Charlotte had been a mutual agreement. He pursed his lips, his long fingers flying across the screen. Laura assumed he was posting the press release and didn't pay much attention. But a few minutes later, the PR department called again. After hanging up, for the first time, Laura lost her temper, shouting. Ethan Marshall, a nurse on duty, came out of a room and shot her a disapproving look. "This is a hospital, please be quiet." Laura couldn't care less. She shoved her phone screen in Ethan's face, furious. "Are you insane? These words will ruin your career in this industry." Chapter 21. Ethan remained unfazed by Laura's anger, while Wendy, on the other hand, was startled. She opened her social media app and was stunned by what Ethan had posted 10 minutes ago. "Everything is true. I will stay by her side." With just a few words, he had accepted all the accusations and declared his stance. Wendy had to admire Ethan's courage. Seeing Laura looking like she was about to go mad, she figured the company was furious as well. Ethan put his phone in his pocket, his expression as calm as if nothing had happened. Laura clutched her phone, looking as if disaster had struck. Making him delete it was now impossible. The only thing she could do was try her best to suppress the fallout. She shot Ethan an angry glare and walked away quickly, her eyes glued to her phone. Not long after Laura left, a call came from Vincent. Ethan glanced at the screen, a flash of anger in his eyes. His attempt to get the house had failed. Now he was probably calling to ask for money. Brother-in-law? Before he could speak, Vincent's voice, tinged with a hint of glee, came through the phone. Ethan's frown deepened. Vincent laughed. "Don't blame me. I tried to discuss this with you nicely before, but you didn't appreciate it." Ethan didn't respond. "Now that this whole thing with you and my sister has blown up, don't you want to think about how to salvage your image?" Vincent asked, his tone enticing. "You have a good idea?" Ethan retorted with a sneer. He knew Vincent was just using this situation to extort money and property from him. As for his public image, after the statement he had just posted, it was pretty much beyond saving. Vincent smacked his lips and said, feigning kindness, "As long as you divorce my sister and give her the house, my mom and I will put in a good word for you later." Hearing this, Ethan actually laughed out of anger. With Charlotte in her current state, what was the difference between giving her the house and giving it to Vincent? In the end, all Vincent cared about was that house. "Then, let me tell you very clearly right now, give up." Ethan hung up and looked at the call recording he had just saved, his eyes filled with suspicion. On his way to the hospital, he had seen clips of Vincent's live stream. He had to admit, he was impressed by Brenda and Vincent. Their tearful accusations were on par with a professionally trained actor. However, Vincent's overly calculated actions made him suspect that someone was pulling the strings. Ethan's eyelashes lowered, his expression turning colder. Sela's thorn. He had almost forgotten about that bastard. Remembering the way Sela's looked at Charlotte, he seethed with hatred. Could he and Vincent? Gasp! A sharp intake of breath snapped Ethan out of his thoughts. He looked up at Wendy, who was standing by the window. Wendy looked panicked. She's awake, I know she's awake." In an instant, Ethan was on his feet and at the window. His shocked eyes were glued to Charlotte on the bed. Her chest rose and fell gently, and her half-open eyes seemed to be covered in a layer of mist, hazy and confused. Ethan's trembling lips couldn't help but murmur, "Charlotte." He turned to Wendy, his expression tense, and snapped, "What are you standing there for? Go get the doctor." Wendy nodded with a pained expression. Laura had just told her not to tell Ethan about Charlotte's condition, but now Charlotte had opened her eyes again. There was no way to hide it now. The doctor came and examined her again. Ethan watched so intently he almost went inside. When the doctor came out, he saw that Charlotte still had that same unaware expression. A pang of heartache mixed with a growing sense of unease. The doctor took off his stethoscope and came out. "It's a normal physiological reaction for the patient to open her eyes now. Until the aftereffects are minimized, her consciousness will be very weak." "What do you mean?" Chapter 22. The doctor felt a chill run down his spine at the sharp, cold tone. Ethan's eyes were like knives, dissecting the word after effects that had come from the doctor's mouth. He knew Charlotte might become like a child, but what the doctor had just said sounded even more severe. Wendy didn't dare to speak, pretending she knew nothing. The doctor adjusted his glasses and patiently explained, based on her condition, even if the after effects are minimized, her intelligence will likely revert to that of a young child. He paused for a few seconds, as if giving Ethan time to process. And before that, her consciousness will be uncontrollable. So, she needs more than just hospital treatment. The most important thing is the care and companionship of her family. The doctor's words weren't long, but they seemed to squeeze the air from Ethan's lungs. He looked at Charlotte, lying in the bed with vacant eyes, his heart feeling as if it were being devoured by countless ants. Charlotte's fate for the rest of her life had been decided. She would never be able to live like a normal person again. She might not even remember him or anything from the past. A stinging sensation filled Ethan's eyes, making it unbearable. He couldn't bear to look at Charlotte, yet he couldn't bring himself to look away. After the doctor left, Wendy stood silently to the side, watching Ethan lean against the window, his heavy breathing and barely audible whimpers surprising her. She had never seen Ethan cry, except when he was acting. Wendy sighed to herself and leaned against the wall, continuing to play on her phone. As an outsider, her sympathy was with Charlotte. As for Ethan, she felt much like some people on social media that he had gone too far. He was already married, yet he had answered those questions about his love life right in front of his wife. The sky was overcast, but Brenda Hayes emerged from the bank with a cheerful expression. She lovingly caressed her passbook, taking a moment to get used to the fact that it now held tens of thousands of dollars. Suddenly, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of her. The window rolled down, and Silas Thorne offered a polite smile. "Auntie Brenda." Brenda's eyes immediately filled with suspicion, and she quickly tucked the passbook into her pocket. "Who are you?" Seeing her greedy little gesture, a flash of contempt crossed Silas's eyes. "My name is Silas Thorne. I'm a friend of Vincent's." Hearing Silas's name, Brenda froze. Her suspicious expression instantly transformed into one of pure joy, as if she were seeing the god of wealth. "So your Silas Thorne Vincent mentions you to me all the time, more than just mentioning him." She knew that all this money had come from him. Silas got out of the car and opened the back door. "Auntie, let me give you a ride home." Seeing how generous he was, Brenda didn't feel shy at all. In fact, she was eager to establish a connection with him. As he drove, Silas said, "Auntie, actually, I'm much closer with Charlotte." At the mention of Charlotte, Brenda's smile stiffened. Is that so? And I like her very much." "Huh." Brenda clearly hadn't expected Silas to say that. The car stopped at a red light. Silas looked at the dumbfounded Brenda in the rearview mirror, a deep meaning in his upturned eyes. "I felt so guilty ever since Charlotte's accident. If I had been by her side, I would never have let anything happen to her." He didn't say it outright, but Brenda understood that he wanted to be her son-in-law. Her heart soared as if she had just received another tens of thousands of dollars. She couldn't believe Charlotte was so lucky, with one rich man after another falling for her. But when she thought of Ethan, a look of disgust crossed her face. Since Charlotte had married Ethan, she hadn't gotten anything good from the Marshall family and had even endured many disdainful looks from Alina. But this Silas Thorne was different. He was already so generous, and they weren't even family yet. Brenda sighed. "Well, there's nothing to be done. Charlotte isn't divorced yet." The light turned green. Silas started the car and looked away. "Auntie, you can help them get a divorce." Chapter 23, a few days later. Charlotte was moved to a regular ward. Laura leaned against the door of the hospital room, looked at Ethan, who had been by the bedside for days, and sighed helplessly. After much deliberation, she walked over. "Ethan, the company has arranged a press conference for you." Ethan looked up, his eyes showing no emotion. "Okay," Laura frowned. "Aren't you going to ask why?" "No need," he replied flatly. After the press conference, there was only one possible outcome for him. He would be shelved by the company. Shelved was the nice way of putting it. In reality, it meant being abandoned. Laura was completely out of patience, but she felt terrible. Ethan had worked so hard to get where he was today, starting as a minor actor. But now, the company could no longer fend off the public outcry. "Fine," Laura shrugged, looking at the still unconscious Charlotte. "Are you really going to take care of her?" She was worried that Ethan, a young master accustomed to being the center of attention, wouldn't be able to provide the meticulous care a patient needed. Ethan nodded, his gaze never leaving Charlotte. "I have to take care of her." His tone was firm, even tinged with regret. He had no intention of entrusting Charlotte to her selfish mother and brother, and he certainly wouldn't give her up to Sela's thorn. Laura said, "All right, since you've made up your mind, I won't say any more." She checked her phone. "I'll come pick you up at noon tomorrow. Wendy can watch over things here for now." "Okay." The next day, just as Laura and Ethan were leaving District 1, a call came from a leaner marshal. Ethan glanced at the screen and quickly declined it. "Why didn't you answer?" Laura asked, puzzled. Ethan stared out the car window, his voice calm. "It would be trouble if I did." His mother didn't usually pay attention to social media, but after all this time, she must have found out. She was probably calling to demand that he divorce Charlotte. Ethan frowned. He wasn't worried about his mom, but about Vincent and Sela's thorn. The quieter they were, the more uneasy he felt. The press conference venue was packed with people, all eagerly awaiting the appearance of Ethan Marshall, the man at the center of the storm. As the silver-gray van approached, reporters and cameramen swarmed it. Ethan, wearing only a baseball cap, had just stepped out of the car when the already noisy area outside the venue turned into a chaotic marketplace. Ethan walked forward without a word, his eyes scanning the reporters in front of him, all desperate for his response. He was suddenly reminded of Charlotte, who had interviewed him that day. "Ethan Marshall, you scumbag," some of his former fans, held back by security, shouted insults. Ethan pressed his lips together and continued walking as if he hadn't heard. But inside, he couldn't help but laugh at himself. He had played scumbags before, but none of them seemed worse than him. Before he could even enter the venue, a woman in a gray tank top suddenly pushed through the crowd and grabbed onto the security guard next to Ethan, wailing. "Ethan Marshall, give me back my daughter." Laura looked and saw that it was Brenda Hayes. Fire ignited in her eyes. This mother-son duo was truly relentless. Ethan wasn't surprised. On the way here, he had been wondering what Vincent would pull next. Sure enough, this time it was Brenda. In an instant, all the cameras turned to her. Some reporters even made way for her to make her plea. Brenda took a step toward Ethan and fell to her knees with a thud. "For the sake of the few years you were my son-in-law, I'm begging you, please, give me back my daughter." Chapter 24. Tears streamed down Brenda's face as she acted like she wanted to cling to Ethan's leg and cry. She was dressed plainly and was older, making her appear as the victim in most people's eyes. Nearly everyone sympathized with her. Ethan glanced at Brenda, then looked past her, scanning the crowd. He didn't see Sela's thorn or Vincent. Brenda's appearance was as sudden as it had been at the wrap party press conference. He frowned, his expression dark. Seeing that Ethan was ignoring her and looking around instead, Brenda thought, "I can't let him see Vincent." "Everyone, judge for yourselves. It's bad enough that this man mistreats my daughter, but now he won't even let me see her," Brenda cried, her voice full of accusation. Laura's head ached. She had to suppress her rage. All she could do was step forward and block the microphones being shoved in Ethan's face. "Everyone, please don't listen to just her side of the story." In a moment, "What do you mean, my side of the story?" A voice like a clanging gong cut her off. Brenda looked at Ethan, her eyes pleading. "It's fine if you won't let me acknowledge you as my son-in-law. We're a humble family, we can't hope to reach your status." She then beat her chest and wailed, "But you can't stop me from acknowledging my own daughter, please. I'm begging you, give her back to us." Ethan finally fixed his gaze on Brenda. His icy, bone-chilling stare made her heart tremble. But thinking of all that money, and the fact that she hadn't done anything wrong, she immediately straightened her back. "The District 1 hospital. Have you been to see her?" Ethan asked, word by word. Brenda froze. She honestly didn't know where Charlotte was. She said, "I want to go, but I can't. You people won't let me see her. I'll take you to see her myself." With that, Ethan helped Brenda up and led her toward the car. Laura was stunned for a moment. She was about to stop him, but then paused. Seeing Brenda's panicked expression, she knew the woman didn't want to go. She was just trying to put Ethan in an impossible position. Brenda had never expected Ethan to do this, and her resistance was immediate and obvious. During the standoff, Vincent suddenly appeared from somewhere, pushed through the crowd, grabbed his mother's hand, and yelled at Ethan, "Ethan Marshall, don't you go too far," Ethan scoffed. Finally, he shows up. He looked at Vincent and asked, "What, you don't want to see her?" Vincent glanced at the people around them and gritted his teeth. "We'll go on our own. We don't need your fake kindness." He pulled his mother away. "Mom, let's go. There's no point in begging someone so heartless." As Vincent led Brenda away, a group of reporters and cameramen followed them. Ethan watched them leave with cold eyes, seemingly unaffected. Laura, ignoring the mother and son, led Ethan into the venue. District 1 Hospital, VIP ward. Just as Wendy was about to go out for lunch, she saw Sela's Thorne approaching. She immediately became alert. Ethan had warned her not to let this man near Charlotte. Sela's walked straight toward the room. Wendy raised her arm to block him. "Sorry, you can't go in." "Why not?" Sela's asked with a smile. Wendy felt a little lucky that she was Ethan's assistant. Otherwise, she might not have been able to resist the man's smile. She cleared her throat. "You're an outsider." A cold glint flashed in Sela's eyes. "I'm Charlotte's superior. I'm here to check on her condition so I can report back to the station director." After considering his words, Wendy slowly lowered her arm. "All right." Chapter 25, the press conference. Ethan, who had been at the hospital for days, looked much more haggard than usual. But the reporters didn't miss a single opportunity, firing one sharp question after another. Laura forced a polite smile. "One at a time, please." She glanced at Ethan, who seemed to be lost in thought, and her expression grew even stiffer. After a long moment, Ethan's gaze slowly focused, pulling his thoughts back from Charlotte. He sat up straight. "Regarding the matter between me and Charlotte Hayes, I would like to apologize to everyone in my personal capacity." His tone was so flat it was as if he were talking about something trivial. Laura frowned and pursed her lips. She knew Ethan had a reserved personality and that his words were sincere. But others didn't know that, while Ethan's public persona wasn't exactly that of a warm and caring man, he was known for being serious and gentle. This would only give the media more reason to connect him with the heartless man Vincent had described. The press conference lasted only half an hour, but to Ethan, it felt like 10 years. After they left, Laura couldn't hold back her frustration any longer. "What were you thinking? Even if this is your last public appearance, you should have chosen your words more carefully." Ethan simply replied, "Back to the District 1 hospital." Laura was so exasperated by his unyielding attitude that she laughed. "Fine, I give up on you." A light drizzle began to fall, and a sudden chill filled the air. Ethan stared out the car window at the passing scenery, still looking as if his mind were elsewhere. As they neared the hospital, his phone rang. He glanced at it. It was Vincent. "Laura," Ethan suddenly said to her in the driver's seat, "don't say anything in a moment." "Huh?" Laura was confused but nodded. "Okay." Ethan then answered the phone. "Hello, Ethan Marshall." From his voice, it was clear that Vincent was still angry. "Not calling me brother-in-law anymore?" Ethan asked sarcastically. "Don't you fucking try to get familiar with me," Vincent cursed crudely. "Hurry up and divorce my sister. Don't taint her with your stench." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Since when did you care so much about her?" Vincent sneered. "She's my sister. Of course, I'm closer to her than an outsider like you. You want more than just for us to divorce, don't you? Of course. You better calculate the division of assets carefully, especially that villa." The greedy tone in his voice filled Ethan with a deep sense of disgust. He lowered his gaze, his tone suddenly sincere. "If I divorce her and give you all the money and the house, can you take good care of her?" Vincent laughed. "Duh. With money, I can give a grand funeral to a dead person, let alone take care of a good-for-nothing." Ethan's expression turned icy. "Fine, I'll consider it." As soon as he hung up, Laura eagerly asked, "Was that Vincent?" "Yes," Ethan replied, nodding thoughtfully. "Charlotte is such a good person. How could she have a mother and brother like that?" Laura said indignantly. Ethan frowned, not paying attention to Laura's words. Given Vincent's personality, he should have been trying to extort as much money as possible, using his relationship with Charlotte. His sudden urgency for a divorce was highly unusual. The only possibility was that Sela's Thorne was behind it. Ethan's eyes darkened, his hand slowly tightening into a fist, his gaze filled with a grim shadow. District 1 hospital. As they approached, they saw Wendy standing outside the hospital room from a distance. Seeing her flustered expression, Ethan's face darkened. What are you doing standing outside? Where's Charlotte? Wendy didn't speak, her panicked eyes darting toward the room. Ethan followed her gaze and froze. Mom. Chapter 26. Eleanor Marshall sat on the empty hospital bed, her face dark, her eyes burning with suppressed rage. Ethan stared at the bed for a few seconds, then his heart clenched. Where's Charlotte? How dare you mention her? Eleanor shot up, pointing at the bed. Tell me the truth. Whose child was Charlotte pregnant with back then? Ethan's body went rigid. Laura quickly closed the door and stood guard outside with Wendy. What's going on? Where's Charlotte? She asked Wendy, her face a mask of confusion and urgency. Wendy stammered. Charlotte's boss came to see her, and then Mrs. Marshall arrived shortly after. And then? I was outside, so I didn't hear what they said, but then Charlotte's boss had her transferred to another hospital. Laura felt like slapping her. Why didn't you stop them? Wendy explained meekly. I tried, but Mrs. Marshall yelled at me. Laura was speechless with anger. Inside the room, Eleanor's eyes were red with fury. You knew the child in her belly wasn't yours, and you still married her and brought her into our family. Are you trying to kill me with anger? Ethan frowned and argued. That child was mine. You're still lying. The other person already admitted it. The words, the other person, finally triggered Ethan's delayed suspicion. Why was his mother suddenly bringing up the child from back then? He asked coldly, Mom, who is this other person you're talking about? Eleanor crossed her arms. The father of that bastard, of course. Her words were like thorns, piercing Ethan's heart, but he could tell that person was Sela's thorn. Eleanor paid no mind to the regret and anger in Ethan's eyes. You must divorce her. Impossible, Ethan said, throwing the word at her before turning to leave. Ethan Marshall, Eleanor was so angry her chest hurt. The door was suddenly thrown open, startling Laura and Wendy. Before they could react, Ethan had already rushed to the nurse's station. The young nurse who had just started her shift blushed when she saw him, too excited to speak. Charlotte Hayes. Look up Charlotte Hayes for me, Ethan said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. The nurse fumbled with the computer. After about 20 seconds, she looked up and said softly, the records show she was transferred to Binhai Hospital in District 2. Ethan's eyes darkened. Laura, give me the car keys. Laura Norton, who had just walked over, froze and immediately shook her head. No, you can't right now. Before she could finish, Ethan Marshall bolted. Ethan, Laura called out anxiously, watching his retreating back. Has he gone completely mad? The drizzle outside was growing heavier. Ethan hailed a cab in the downpour, his reddened eyes fixed on the last remaining photo of Charlotte Hayes on his phone. In the picture, Charlotte was holding cherry blossom petals, her expression a mix of confusion and charm as she turned toward the camera. As Ethan stared, a tear suddenly fell, landing right on Charlotte's face in the photo. He quickly wiped it away, but his vision remained blurred. He'd taken it 4 years ago when they went to see the cherry blossoms together. At that time, Charlotte had been trying to catch the falling petals when he suddenly called her name. In the instant she turned her head, Ethan had captured the image that had made his heart skip a beat. Suddenly, the photo was replaced by an incoming call. Unknown number. Ethan wiped his tears away, swallowing the lump in his throat before answering. Hello, he said, his voice hoarse and still thick with emotion. Ethan Marshall. Sela's Thorn's voice made Ethan freeze for 2 seconds before rage surged through him. Sela's Thorn is playing dirty tricks the only thing you know how to do? He growled through clenched teeth. The voice on the other end chuckled. I'm just calling to ask you to thank Mrs. Marshall for me. He paused, then enunciated each word clearly. Thank her for returning Charlotte to me. Chapter 27, Sela's deliberately stressed the word, returning. As if to say Charlotte should have belonged to him all along. Ethan's other hand clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breathing grew heavy and ragged. The small taxi could no longer contain his volcanic rage. But just then, the call was disconnected. It was as if Sela's, having declared his victory, had nonchalantly moved on. The screen changed back to Charlotte's face, and a part of Ethan's heart softened. All his anger seemed to drain away through that one soft spot. Still, his face was grim as he told the driver, faster. The driver replied, any faster and I'll be speeding. The words had barely left his mouth when, a few yards ahead at the red light, a car suddenly came speeding toward them, driving on the wrong side of the road. After hitting 2 other cars, it swerved and barreled straight for them. The driver cried out in shock, frantically spinning the steering wheel. The moment his body slammed violently against the car door, Ethan clutched the phone tightly to his chest. A deafening boom echoed in his ears, and all his regret, rage, and love dissipated into darkness. Bayside Hospital. Silas Thorne slipped his phone into his pocket, his gaze fixed on Charlotte before him. He reached out, tucking a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear, then leaned in and whispered, "Don't worry, darling. I'll make sure everyone who ever hurt you gets what they deserve." Charlotte's half-open eyes were vacant, showing no reaction to Silas's words. Knock, 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 a few taps at the door, and the doctor entered, holding a chart. Silas straightened up and asked, "When will she become more lucid?" The doctor walked to the bedside, carefully examined Charlotte's condition, and began making notes. Based on her current state, he frowned, it might be another half a month or so. Hearing this, Silas's expression tightened. The doctor tucked his pen into his breast pocket. Even when she's lucid, it only means she can hear what people are saying. She can't produce a corresponding reaction. Silas looked at Charlotte, his heart aching. "I understand." Shortly after dark, Vincent Hayes rushed in, frantic. He didn't even glance at Charlotte, heading straight for Silas. "Silas, did you hear? Ethan Marshall was in a car accident." Silas froze, turning to him. "When?" He had just spoken to Ethan a few hours ago. Could it have been after that? "This afternoon, at the Southbridge Avenue intersection. I heard the driver was killed on impact. No idea if he's dead or alive." Vincent said worriedly, "If he ends up like my sister, can they still get a divorce?" Silas's eyes darkened. He gently placed Charlotte's hand back under the covers and stood up. He clapped Vincent on the shoulder like a brother. "Have those stocks you bought gone up recently?" At the mention of stocks, Vincent's attention was immediately diverted. He grinned. "They have," perhaps realizing his voice was too loud. Vincent lowered it, but he couldn't hide his glee. "Silas, if it weren't for your advice, I wouldn't have made so much." Silas looked down and smiled. "This is just small change." Vincent paused, his greed piqued. "Silas, seeing as I helped you out, how about you show me a few more ways to get rich?" At that, Silas leaned in and whispered a few words in Vincent's ear. Vincent's eyes flickered, and a hint of hesitation crossed his face. Is this really going to work? What if I lose?" "I'm not telling you to bet everything. Besides, you still have the money from the stocks," Silas said, removing his hand as a reminder. Vincent thought about it. He couldn't believe his luck would be that bad. He'd already quit his job anyway, and after buying a house and finding a wife, there wouldn't be much left of this money. He gritted his teeth. "All right, I'll go right now." Chapter 28 a month later. As winter approached, more people were sunbathing outside the inpatient building of the hospital. Silas pushed Charlotte's wheelchair next to a flower bed, tucked a blanket over her legs, and then sat down beside her. Noticing her slightly chapped lips parting, Silas opened a water bottle, poured a little into the cap, and held it to her mouth. Some of the water spilled as Charlotte sipped from the edge of the cap, and he quickly took out a tissue to wipe it away. Passing patients saw Silas's meticulous care and looked on with approval. "Charlotte," Silas said softly, putting the bottle down. "Charlotte?" Charlotte's eyes were half closed, her gaze empty as she stared at the ground. She was completely unresponsive to his voice, as if she hadn't heard a thing. A pang of sorrow shot through Silas's heart. It had been nearly 10 days since Charlotte had been able to sit up, but she was like a soulless doll, showing no reaction to the outside world. Silas gently took her hand and pressed it to his cheek. "Ethan Marshall is still in a coma. Don't you think that's his karma?" Charlotte remained still, her even breathing making her look as if she were dozing. "Let's not talk about him." Silas's reddened eyes filled with deep affection. "It reminds me of the first time I saw you. All those cherry blossoms couldn't compare to your beauty." With that, he took out his phone, opened his photo album, and a side profile picture of Charlotte holding cherry blossom petals appeared on the screen. Silas held the phone in front of Charlotte. "Look, isn't it beautiful?" After a few seconds, he pulled his hand back, clutching the phone to his chest as if it were a treasure. "I never thought I'd see you at the company again. It's a shame you had Ethan Marshall by your side." At the mention of that name, his eyes filled with disgust. "He never loved you enough." Charlotte's eyelashes trembled as if the words had struck a chord. After a long while, Silas reluctantly placed Charlotte's hand back inside the blanket. "Don't be afraid. "I'll take care of you from now on," he said, gently stroking her gaunt face. Charlotte's gaze flickered and her lips moved stiffly, but there was nothing more. District 1 Hospital, VIP ward. Laura Norton walked into the room and saw Eleanor Marshall had just finished wiping Ethan's face, so she took a seat nearby. Eleanor's eyes were red and swollen. She had clearly been crying again. Laura went over to her. "Mrs. Marshall, please don't be too upset. Didn't the doctor say he would wake up? But it's been a month." Eleanor wiped away a tear, her eyes glinting with hatred. "This is all Charlotte Hayes' fault. If it weren't for her, Ethan wouldn't be like this." Laura fell silent. She thought to herself that if it weren't for Mrs. Marshall, Ethan wouldn't have chased after Charlotte to District 2 and gotten into the car accident in the first place. Eleanor sniffled a few times and turned to look at Ethan. She saw his eyelashes flutter and his brow slowly furrow, as if he were about to wake up. "Ethan?" Eleanor called his name softly a few times. Ethan's eyes slowly opened, and she burst into tears of joy. "You're awake, you scared me to death." Laura also walked to the bedside. "Ethan?" He had been in a coma for a month and had lost a lot of weight, his face pale. But she was more worried about what would happen if Ethan tried to find Charlotte again. Although the buzz around his situation had died down, there were still plenty of eyes on him. Ethan's vision was blurry, and it took a while for it to slowly clear. The dull ache at the back of his head and on his forehead made him frown. "Ethan, how are you feeling?" Eleanor asked with concern. Only then did Ethan realize there were people beside him. His expression grew confused. "Are you talking to me?" At his words, the faces of Eleanor and Laura changed, and a sense of unease grew within them. "Who are you?" Chapter 29, Doctor's Office. Eleanor Marshall asked through her tears, "Doctor, what's wrong with my son? Why doesn't he even recognize me?" The doctor quickly tried to calm her. "Don't panic. There's a blood clot in his brain pressing on a nerve. Once the clot is absorbed, he'll gradually recover." Hearing this, Eleanor slowly began to feel relieved, but then she asked, "How long will that take?" The doctor glanced at the CT scan. "Based on the size of the clot, it will probably take about a month. Of course, it varies from person to person." In the hospital room, Laura Norton poured a glass of water and handed it to Ethan. "Thank you," Ethan said with a smile as he took it. This polite and gentle demeanor was a bit unsettling for Laura. She probed cautiously, "Do you really not remember who you are?" Ethan tried to think, but the effort made his head feel like it was on fire. He frowned. "I can't remember. My head hurts." Laura quickly told him to take a sip of water and relax. She had actually wanted to talk about Ethan's contract termination with the company, but in his current state, it seemed impossible to discuss anything. "Ethan, I'm your agent. You used to be an actor," Laura said slowly. A flicker of surprise crossed Ethan's eyes. He was an actor, but you can't take on any roles for now. Laura chose her words carefully before continuing. "When you're better, can you find me then?" She had taken on 2 new artists and wouldn't be able to look after Ethan anymore. She sighed, took a business card from her bag, and handed it to him, along with a phone whose screen was half shattered. "This is your phone. I forgot to give it to you earlier." Laura remembered the nurse saying that on the day of the accident, Ethan had been clutching the phone so tightly they couldn't pry it from his grasp. Perhaps there was something very important to him inside. Ethan took them, looking a bit dazed. "Thank you." After waiting a while, Laura saw Eleanor return. She said her goodbyes and left. Ethan looked at the woman who bore some resemblance to him. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Mom." Seeing this changed Ethan, Eleanor's eyes welled up again. Then, a thought suddenly struck her. If she used this opportunity to let Sela's thorn take Charlotte away, by the time Ethan remembered, Charlotte would be long gone. After waiting 2 or 3 years, she could just file for divorce. The sadness she felt over Ethan's amnesia was instantly swept away. Eleanor smiled, took out her phone, and walked over. "Ethan, do you remember Penelope Croft?" Ethan was taken aback. The name was even more foreign to him than Eleanor or Laura. Eleanor opened a photo of a pretty girl with a brilliant smile. "She!" Ethan stared, the words "that's not her" stuck in his throat. He froze for a few seconds. Why had he almost blurted that out? He even had a feeling that this wasn't the person he wanted to see. Ethan subconsciously glanced at the broken phone in his hand. Seeing that his attention wasn't on her phone at all, Eleanor said with a hint of displeasure, "Ethan, take a good look. This is your fiancée, Penelope Croft." Fiancé? Ethan looked up in surprise. Yes. You're getting married as soon as Penelope finishes her master's degree, Eleanor said with a smile. Ethan didn't speak. His brow was furrowed, his lips pressed into a tight line, a clear sign of resistance. He just couldn't shake the feeling that he had no connection to the girl on the screen. Before long, Eleanor said she was going home to tidy up. Ethan lay alone on the hospital bed, lost in thought. He couldn't help but touch the sore spot on his head. Suddenly, the image of a girl, so blurry he couldn't even see her face, flashed through his mind. Ethan's eyes lit up. His lips moved slightly, but he couldn't form the name. Who was she? Chapter 30 Clearwater Condos. Brenda Hayes had just finished making dinner when she heard a knock on the door. She opened it to find Silas Thorne, and her face broke into a wide smile. Silas, come in, have a seat. Mrs. Hayes, I hope I'm not intruding. Silas placed the fruit he'd brought on the table. How are you settling into the new place? Brenda poured him a cup of tea. It's certainly more comfortable than the countryside. She sat down, her gratitude overflowing. We really have you to thank for this. Not only for taking care of Charlotte, but also for giving us such a nice home. Brenda wrung her hands, on the verge of grabbing Silas's hand to thank him profusely. Silas smiled and asked, Did you sell the house in the countryside? Sold it, Brenda said with a dismissive wave of her hand. What was the point of keeping that old shack? Hearing this, Silas took a sip of tea, his eyes filled with a smiling satisfaction. Hasn't Vincent come home yet? At the mention of Vincent, a shadow of worry crossed Brenda's brow. I don't know what he's up to. He used to call often, but not so much lately. I heard he's been busy with business. You should try to be understanding. Brenda nodded along, not even asking what kind of business Vincent was involved in. Silas stayed for a short while before leaving. He checked the time and prepared to go make dinner for Charlotte. The villa. As soon as Eleanor Marshall walked in, she was hit by a musty smell. She saw the French door was still broken, with shattered glass all over the floor. The sofa and a curtain were showing signs of mold. She covered her nose and mouth in disgust and ordered someone to clean up the living room. Eleanor went upstairs and entered the master bedroom. The room was clean, with only a thin layer of dust on the tables. She scanned the room, then pulled open the closet, a look of satisfaction in her eyes. There was nothing of Charlotte Hayes's here. Had Charlotte moved out long ago? Eleanor didn't dwell on it. This just saved her the trouble of cleaning things out herself. She took out her phone and dialed a number. Hello, Penelope. I want you to move in tomorrow. You'll be living with Ethan from now on. Penelope, on the other end of the line, clearly hadn't expected Eleanor to be so decisive. She hesitated. Mrs. Marshall, I'm not sure that's a good idea. What's not good about it? Take this chance while Ethan doesn't remember anything to get close to him. Eleanor made her decision final and hung up. As dusk fell, Silas arrived at the hospital with freshly cooked food. A nurse had just removed Charlotte's IV. Seeing him arrive, she quickly said, Mr. Thorne, Miss Hayes just spoke. At her words, Silas's eyes lit up. He immediately sat down in front of Charlotte. She spoke. What did she say? He gently stroked her face. Perhaps because of the heating, her cheeks were flushed a lovely pink. The nurse smiled. When she got her injection today, she said the word hurts, though the pronunciation wasn't very clear. Silas couldn't help but smile too. That's a good sign. The nurse nodded and left with her cart. Charlotte still had a bandage wrapped around her head. Her soft, dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her quiet demeanor was especially endearing. Silas took out the insulated container and arranged the food. I made your favorite today, sweet and sour pork. He picked up a piece of food and brought it to Charlotte's lips. Charlotte slowly opened her mouth, lifting her head slightly to chew. She blinked, and her usually vacant gaze landed squarely on Silas's face. Silas's hand trembled, a smile spreading across his lips. Charlotte, I'm Silas Thorne. Silas Thorne. Charlotte's chewing paused, and her head slowly turned to the side. It was as if she were rejecting the person in front of her, or perhaps it was disappointment. Silas didn't mind. The fact that Charlotte was reacting to the outside world at all was a huge improvement. He happily fed her the rest of the meal. Just as he was packing up the containers, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It was Vincent Hayes, whom he hadn't heard from in a while. Silas stepped outside the room before answering. Hello. Silas, help me chapter 31 on the phone. Vincent Hayes's voice was frantic. Silas spoke slowly. What's wrong? Tell me slowly. Vincent swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I lost. I lost the whole $1,000,000 I brought. Hearing this, Silas couldn't help but smirk, yet he feigned shock. What? You lost $1,000,000? Yes, Vincent's voice took on a tearful tone. I never expected this to happen. Didn't I tell you not to bet so big? Silas said. At first, I was only betting a few thousand. But I won a lot, so I thought if I bet more, I'd win more. I never thought. Vincent pleaded. Silas, please help me one last time. I'm penniless now, I can't even go home. Silas sighed. All right, but you know my money went to you and to buying your mother an apartment. The rest is all going to your sister's treatment. I don't have much left. Just enough to get me home is fine, Vincent said quickly. After hanging up, Silas transferred $10,000 to Vincent's account. He looked at the transaction record and sneered. The greatest flaw of the Hayes mother and son was their overwhelming greed. So greedy that they disregarded the life of their own flesh and blood, Charlotte. Compared to Ethan Marshall, they were even more detestable. Silas refreshed his social media feed again, but there was no news about Ethan. The company must have paid a hefty price to suppress it. Just as he was about to return to the room, he received a text message. It was from Alina Marshall. Take Charlotte Hayes and leave this place. Never come back. After reading it, Silas found it laughable. Brenda Hayes was foolish and indecisive, while Alina Marshall was sharp-tongued and cruel. Charlotte was truly unlucky to be caught between two women like them. Silas put his phone away and walked back into the room. He saw Charlotte leaning against her pillow, staring blankly at the television. A sense of contentment washed over him. He wanted to take Charlotte away too, but there were still some things to take care of, and her body couldn't handle the strain of travel. Once everything was settled, he could truly be with her with all his heart. 1 week later, Ethan Marshall was discharged from the hospital and returned home. He looked at the villa before him, and a strange mix of unfamiliarity and recognition stirred something in his heart. As he entered, his eyes were uncontrollably drawn to the French door. It was perfectly intact. Ethan froze. In his fragmented memory, he was sure that door had been broken. Penelope! Alina called out, and Penelope Croft, wearing an apron, came out of the kitchen. Mrs. Marshall, Ethan, you're back, Penelope said, forcing a stiff smile. Ethan looked at her and frowned. For some reason, he didn't like Penelope being here. I'm going to get some rest. Following a faint memory, he started up the stairs. Seeing him go upstairs, Alina warned Penelope, be smart. Don't mention a single thing about Charlotte Hayes. Penelope nodded reluctantly, a hint of unwillingness in her eyes. Only after Alina left did she dare to let out a frustrated sigh. If Mrs. Marshall wasn't holding the fact that she'd sponsored her education over her head, she would never do something so absurd. She glanced upstairs, shook her head helplessly, and went back into the kitchen. The bedroom smelled of fresh lemon, a clear sign that someone had cleaned it. Ethan looked at the empty room, and his heart inexplicably tightened. With heavy steps, he walked to the edge of the bed and sat down. His hand hesitated for a moment before slowly reaching out to touch the soft pillow. A flicker of struggle crossed his dark eyes. Ethan felt that there should be another person in this room, but it definitely wasn't Penelope. As if remembering something, he took the shattered phone out of his pocket. Maybe there was something on the phone that could help him remember. Chapter 32. Just as she placed the freshly cooked dishes on the table, Penelope Croft saw Ethan Marshall heading for the door. Ethan, where are you going? She asked quickly. Ethan glanced at her and put on a mask. I have something to do, you can eat without me. Before Penelope could ask anything else, the door had closed. Phone repair shop. The owner shook his head as he examined the phone. This is really smashed up. Can it be fixed? Ethan asked with concern. It can, the owner looked up, but it'll need an original screen and we're out of stock right now. It'll be 5 or 6 days. Hearing this, Ethan finally felt a sense of relief. I'll come back in a week to pick it up then. By the time he left the shop, it was almost dark. Ethan walked aimlessly down the street. He stopped abruptly in front of a jewelry store. A huge poster of a famous actress named Serafina Vance was displayed in the window. On her right ring finger, she wore a diamond ring. Ethan stared blankly at the ring on her hand. Vaguely, fragmented memories flew around in his mind like sharp blades. He bent over, clutching his head in pain. After a long while, the pain slowly subsided. Ethan, his face pale, took a few deep breaths. He found himself walking into the store. A salesperson immediately came up to him. "Sir, can I help you with something?" Ethan scanned the display, his gaze settling on a ring identical to the one Serafina Vance was wearing in the poster. The salesperson, with a keen eye, immediately took it out. "This is from the newly released Isabini True Love Collection," the salesperson recommended enthusiastically. "If you buy it and the size isn't right, you can come back anytime to exchange it." "I can exchange it?" Ethan asked. The salesperson nodded. "Of course. About 2 months ago, a gentleman bought the smallest size, but he came back the next day to exchange it." Hearing this, Ethan nodded distractedly. He looked at the small ring, and an unbearable sadness inexplicably washed over his heart. It felt like he had lost something important. Pain crept back onto Ethan's brow. He rubbed his head, taking several deep breaths to ease the ache. Meanwhile, Vincent Hayes, who had returned home in disgrace a few days earlier, was slumped dejectedly on the sofa. The thought that he had not only lost the $1 million he'd brought, but also the $200,000 he'd borrowed filled him with resentment. Vincent angrily took a sip of tea and slammed the cup down on the table with a bang. Brenda Hayes, who was watching TV nearby, glared at him. "What's your problem?" Vincent turned his head guiltily. Brenda still didn't know he had lost the money. If she found out how much he'd lost, she would probably kill him. "Mom, how's Sis been lately?" he asked nonchalantly. Brenda, engrossed in her TV drama, replied without taking her eyes off the screen. "I haven't been to see her. With Silas there, we don't have to worry." At her words, Vincent's shoulders slumped, and he lay back down as if all the air had been let out of him. He had been thinking of using Ethan and Charlotte's situation to get more money. But Silas had forbidden him from dragging Charlotte into it again, so he had given up on that idea. Now, the only money he had left was the few $100,000 from the stocks he'd bought, plus this house. Vincent scratched his head in frustration, not wanting to think about it anymore. As long as the stocks continued to rise, he would still have the money to pay his debts. Bayside Hospital. After wiping Charlotte's face and hands clean, Silas sat by her bedside and started talking to her. "Does your head still hurt?" he asked, stroking her dark hair. Charlotte, however, was staring at the TV, gently biting her lower lip, her eyes filled with a childlike confusion. Silas glanced at the cartoon playing on the TV, and a pang of pain shot through his heart. Was this a sign that she was getting better? But this was also the best it was likely to get. Water. The faint sound made Silas's eyes widen. He looked at Charlotte's trembling lips, his own breath held in suspense. "Water." Chapter 33. Charlotte tilted her head, her expression one of intense concentration, as if she were trying very hard to express herself. Silas quickly grabbed the water from the table and brought it to her lips, but Charlotte turned her head away, avoiding it. Water, she mumbled, her eyelashes fluttering down. Silas stood frozen for a long moment before he understood. Perhaps Charlotte was trying to say sleep, but her speech was so slurred that it came out as water. "Okay, time for Charlotte to sleep." Silas put the cup down and gently stroked her face. After slowly helping her lie down by supporting her hands and shoulders, he turned off the TV. Like a child, Charlotte fell asleep almost instantly. Silas stood guard by her side, the affection in his eyes so intense it could have wrapped around her completely. He thought that if time could just stop at this moment forever, he would give anything. The villa. The food on the table had long gone cold. Penelope Croft rested her head on her hand, waiting anxiously for Ethan Marshall. When the clock struck 9, the door finally opened. Penelope immediately stood up and went over. "Ethan, you're back. I'll go heat up the food." "Don't heat up my portion," Ethan replied. "I'm going to rest." He was polite yet distant, treating her not like a fiancé, but more like a guest. Penelope stood frozen in place, a bitter taste in her mouth. She didn't want to be here, fawning over someone who clearly didn't care, but she was indebted to his mother. The next day, early in the morning, a loud shout from Vincent Hayes irritated his mother, Brenda. She swatted him with a broom. "What are you screaming about so early in the morning?" Vincent stared at his phone, watching the stocks he had bought plummet, on the verge of a complete crash. Panic seized him. With his stocks tied up, what money did he have left? He grabbed his jacket and rushed out the door, ignoring his mother's confused questions. As he walked, Vincent tried calling Sela's Thorn, but the call wouldn't go through. His legs suddenly felt weak. Despite the early winter chill, he was drenched in a cold sweat. If the stocks kept falling, forget making a profit, he might not even be able to pay back the money he'd borrowed. Vincent was frantic. Suddenly, the name Ethan Marshall popped into his head. He gradually calmed down and started scheming again. Silas had only said not to drag Charlotte into it. He hadn't said anything about not going after Ethan. The two of them weren't divorced yet. He could still use that as leverage to get some money from the Marshall family. With this thought, Vincent felt as if he had taken a calming pill. He brazenly headed for Ethan's house. Penelope had already made breakfast, but Ethan was sitting on the sofa, staring at an ashtray, showing no intention of eating. "Ethan," she called out. Ethan stood up and looked at her. "Are you really my fiancé?" His presence wasn't as sharp as before, but even his softened gaze still held an inherent coldness. A chill ran down Penelope's spine. "Yes, I am." Before Ethan could say more, there was a frantic knocking at the door. As if finding an escape, Penelope turned and ran to open it. When the door opened, Vincent was about to start yelling, but he froze when he saw an unfamiliar girl. "Who are you?" They both asked the question at the same time. Vincent glared and peered inside. "Where's Ethan Marshall?" While Penelope was still stunned, Ethan's confused voice came from behind her. "Who is it?" Seeing him approach, Vincent's gaze darted between the two of them. Suddenly, he swung a fist at Ethan. "You bastard! Ethan Marshall, you bring a homewrecker home before you're even divorced." Chapter 34, Ethan Marshall narrowly dodged the fist that was about to land on his face. Vincent Hayes's words made his eyes glaze over. "I'm sorry, who are you? You mentioned a divorce. Are you talking about me?" Hearing this, Vincent froze mid-motion, looking at him in bewilderment. What was wrong with Ethan Marshall? He turned to the pale-faced Penelope Croft. "What's wrong with him?" Penelope leaned against the entryway wall, her face a mask of panic. I don't know." Her mind was consumed by Vincent's accusation of her being a homewrecker. If this got back to her university, she would be too ashamed to show her face. The chaotic situation left Vincent utterly confused. He eyed Ethan suspiciously. He noticed that Ethan's gaze lacked its former cold intensity and was instead filled with confusion and doubt. Vincent frowned. Could that car accident have scrambled his brains? "You don't remember me, what about my sister?" he asked. Ethan was taken aback. "Your sister?" Penelope quickly interrupted. "Who are you?" "I'll have you arrested for trespassing," Vincent sneered. "Trespassing? Good. Then I'll let everyone see what a homewrecker you are." At his words, Penelope's face turned red, then white. She hastily grabbed her bag and left. Ethan didn't stop her. His attention was completely focused on what Vincent had said about his sister. "You really don't remember?" Vincent asked, half convinced. Ethan shook his head, a sense of urgency growing inside him. He needed to know who this young man's sister was and where she was. Vincent's eyes darted around and he feigned heartbreak, his eyes turning red. "My sister is in the hospital right now. She's like a newborn baby, needing constant care." Hearing this, Ethan's heart inexplicably tightened. "Why?" "Because of you," Vincent's face turned cold. "It's because you were with that woman just now. My sister was heartbroken, went to District 1 to report on the typhoon, and that's how she got hurt and ended up like this." His half-true story made Ethan's eyes widen in shock, but a gut feeling of caution made him skeptical. "Where is she? I want to see her." Vincent wanted to take him to see her to make him believe, but he suddenly remembered Sela's Thorn, who never left Charlotte's side. His heart skipped a beat. If Sela saw him, he would tear him to shreds. "Not today, I'll take you tomorrow," Vincent said, turning to leave. "Wait," Ethan called out. "What's your sister's name?" "Charlotte Hayes." Just a name, yet it was like an ice-cold blade slicing through Ethan's mind. He staggered, feeling as though every nerve in his body was twisting together, the pain making it hard to breathe. "Charlotte Hayes." His pale lips parted, finally uttering the name that had been a blur in his mind. Ethan gasped for breath, a sense of relief washing over him. It was as if he had found a lost piece of himself, even if it was just a tiny fragment. Night fell. Ethan sat on his bed, wide awake. He stared at the warm glow of the bedside lamp, repeating the name Charlotte Hayes over and over. He only stopped when his gaze fell on the slightly ajar nightstand drawer. He squinted, vaguely seeing a red box inside. Ethan reached out and opened the drawer. A heart-shaped red ring box lay quietly inside. He froze, picking up the box and opening it. A diamond ring sparkled brilliantly in the dim light. "This is..." Ethan's expression tensed. Wasn't this the Isabini ring he had seen in the jewelry store yesterday? Had he bought it? Chapter 35. Ethan Marshall stared blankly, holding the ring in his hand. In his memory, he seemed to have taken a girl's hand and slipped this ring onto her ring finger. Then he had taken it off again. Was that girl Charlotte Hayes? Clink! With a soft sound, the ring slipped from Ethan's grasp and fell to the floor. He quickly turned on the light, but the ring was nowhere to be seen. He immediately took out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and looked under the bed. There it was, within easy reach. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. As he reached for it, a piece of paper slid out along with his movement. He frowned. The paper had dark spots on it, like ink blots from too much ink. Ethan picked it up and sat back down on the edge of the bed. He flipped the paper over. The words "divorce agreement" were starkly printed there. His pupils contracted sharply. The handwriting was elegant and neat. You could tell the writer was a serious and gentle person. But the name, Charlotte Hayes, in the bottom right corner, was like a red-hot steel needle piercing his eyes. Had she written this divorce agreement herself? So what her brother said was true? This divorce agreement shattered almost the last shred of doubt Ethan had about Vincent Hayes. He suddenly felt that the headache he was experiencing was nothing compared to the pain in his heart. Was it really as that man had said? That he wanted to divorce Charlotte, that he didn't love her, and that's why he had found Penelope? As the questions grew larger, Ethan couldn't bear to look at another word on the paper. He took out a lighter, went into the bathroom, and set the thin sheet of paper on fire. He watched with a complicated expression as it turned to ash and dissipated into a cloud of white smoke. Bayside Hospital. Taking advantage of a time when Silas Thorne was home, Vincent brought Ethan to the inpatient building. He pointed to a girl in a wheelchair. "That's my sister." Ethan looked over, and his gaze froze. His heart felt as if it had stopped beating for an instant. Under the warm afternoon sun, Charlotte sat in her wheelchair, leaning against the backrest, a light blue blanket covering her legs. Her tilted head was wrapped in bandages, and her slightly curly, long black hair was casually draped over her shoulders. Her delicate features were like those of a puppet with a fixed expression, her empty eyes focused on a leaf in her hand. A nurse beside her seemed to be talking to her, but she showed no reaction at all. Ethan's heavy legs moved uncontrollably toward Charlotte. Vincent grabbed him. "Stop!" Ethan turned his head, his frowning eyes so cold they made Vincent's scalp tingle. "What are you stopping me for?" Ethan pulled his hand away, reverting to his clueless demeanor. However, his gaze never left Charlotte. Faintly, the pain in his heart intensified. Vincent glanced resentfully at his hand. "What are you going to do? Do you think my sister will get better immediately if you go over there? If it weren't for you, she wouldn't be like this." His accusation left Ethan speechless. Even though he didn't remember anything, his subconscious told him that this was indeed his fault. Seeing the pained expression on his face, Vincent decided it was time. "You know, her daily treatment costs a lot of money," he said, smacking his lips. "But your family hasn't contributed a single cent." At these words, Ethan's gaze fell on his face. In those eyes, so similar to Charlotte's, he could see only one word: money. "How much do you need?" Seeing Ethan's directness, Vincent was taken aback. He stuck his hands in his pockets. "First, give me $300,000 for treatment fees." "To you?" Ethan narrowed his eyes, the forgotten coldness seeming to return. Vincent straightened his back. "Who else? I'm her brother." The words had barely left his mouth when he saw Silas Thorne, who was supposed to be at home, suddenly appear. Vincent's heart sank. This was bad. Chapter 36. Seeing the change in Vincent Hayes's expression, Ethan Marshall turned his head to look at Charlotte Hayes. The next moment, his eyes narrowed, and his heart was inexplicably engulfed by a blazing fire. In his eyes, a strange man was very close to his wife, even reaching out to touch her face. Although Charlotte didn't respond, the scene plunged Ethan into a deep jealousy. He clenched his fists and strode forward. Sensing trouble, Vincent turned and quietly slipped away. "Is she all right?" Silas Thorne asked, glancing at the nurse. "She's doing well. She even blinked when I called her name," the nurse said with a smile. Hearing this, Silas breathed a sigh of relief. But in the next instant, someone appeared beside him. Before he could see clearly, a solid punch landed on his face. Silas Thorne. Ethan roared the name instinctively. A flicker of confusion crossed his eyes. Had he just called out this man's name? Silas was stunned. He looked up and saw it was Ethan. "How could you hit someone?" the nurse scolded, handing Silas a tissue. Silas didn't take it and asked the nurse to leave. He stared at Ethan, his eyes filled with a fierce intensity. How did he find this place? Could it be that kid, Vincent? Silas sneered inwardly. That kind of person was truly obsessed with money. After glaring at Silas, Ethan knelt down to look at Charlotte, cupping her face in his hands. Charlotte Hayes. His urgent calls didn't elicit the reaction he had hoped for. Charlotte merely lifted her gaze slightly, looked at Ethan for 2 or 3 seconds, then lowered her eyelashes and returned to her previous state. A sharp pain shot through Ethan's heart, spreading from his chest to his brain. The veins on his forehead throbbed, and fragments of memory began to flood his mind. Seeing his heartbroken expression, Silas scoffed. "I told you, she won't remember you. To her, I'm the closest person she has now." These words made Ethan's already aching head throb even more intensely. He stood up, the corners of his eyes red. "She is my wife," Ethan gasped for breath, completely forgetting whether he had remembered everything or not. He only knew that this man named Silas Thorne had stolen the most important person in his life. Silas sneered. "But I'm the one who truly has Charlotte's best interests at heart." He looked at the crown of Charlotte's head, his tone immediately softening. "I won't let anyone hurt her." "Disgusting." Ethan stood up, placing himself squarely between Charlotte and Silas. A sinister glint flashed in Silas's eyes. "Compared to your heartlessness, I must admit defeat." Ethan's face was grim. He grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and started pushing it toward the inpatient building. "I'm taking her home." Before he had gone a few steps, Silas strode forward and blocked the wheel with his foot. "Home?" He shot Ethan a cold glance, feeling that something was off about him. Before he could investigate further, Ethan's body trembled, and he suddenly collapsed to the ground. He clutched his head, his face flushed red with pain. Only then did Silas remember the car accident from over a month ago. Being in a coma for so long must have meant he'd injured his brain. He clicked his tongue and snorted. "You think you can take care of Charlotte in this state?" Silas pushed the wheelchair slowly toward the inpatient building. Ethan felt his vision, already blurred by pain, grow even dimmer. Charlotte. Charlotte, he gritted his teeth, watching the wheelchair move further and further away. He wanted to get up and chase after her, but his mind felt like it was being filled with molten lava, robbing him of his last bit of consciousness. Chapter 37. Vincent Hayes left the hospital, his heart pounding with fear. He never expected Silas Thorne to come back halfway through. Now he was in deep trouble. Vincent ran home, his face etched with worry. But before he even reached his apartment, he heard his mother, Brenda, arguing with several strange men outside the door. He was already resentful for not getting any money from Ethan Marshall. With a fire of anger brewing inside him, Vincent immediately adopted a furious tone and ran up the stairs. "Mom!" When Brenda saw Vincent return, she rushed over and grabbed his arm. "You're finally back. These men say you owe them money, and they're trying to force us to pay." At her words, Vincent's courage instantly failed him. Looking at the 4 menacing brutes in the room, he forced a smile. "Kingpin Wallace, can you give me a few more days?" The man sitting on the sofa propped his feet on the coffee table. "Sure, but the interest will double." "What?" Vincent's heart sank. If it doubled again, he would have to pay back at least $500,000. Kingpin Wallace glared at him, and he didn't dare to argue. "If you really can't pay it back, you can use this apartment to cover the debt." Hearing this, Brenda shook her head, her eyes red. No, you can't." Vincent steeled himself and gritted his teeth. "Fine," Kingpin Wallace nodded, gave a signal to his men and stood up to leave. "I'll give you 1 month. If you're late, don't blame us." "No, I don't need a month." Vincent was frantic. This was clearly a setup. The longer he waited, the more he would have to pay back after the men left. Brenda demanded to know what Vincent had done. Frustrated, Vincent retreated to his room. He saw that all the stocks he had bought had plummeted. His financial lifelines from Silas and Ethan were gone. He slammed his fist on the table in fury. Amidst the pain, he suddenly remembered the life insurance policy Charlotte had signed. Bayside Hospital. Eleanor Marshall, having received a call from the hospital, rushed over. Seeing Ethan sitting on the bed in a daze, she finally felt a sense of relief. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" Ethan's gaze darkened. He turned to his mother. "Mom, were you the one who told Silas Thorne to take Charlotte away?" Hearing this, Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. You remember?" She bit her lip. "Didn't the doctor say it would take about a month for his memory to return?" Seeing his mother's surprised expression, Ethan understood most of what had happened. He threw off the covers, got out of bed, and headed for Charlotte's room. Silas had just given Charlotte some water. Seeing her staring blankly at the TV again, his expression tensed. He couldn't transfer her to another hospital now, not unless he waited until the end of another treatment period. "Charlotte," Silas sat on the edge of the bed, blocking her view of the TV. Charlotte's eyelashes trembled, her confused gaze falling on his face. Silas said softly, "Please don't leave me, okay? Don't go with Ethan Marshall. He doesn't love you at all." He was like a child trying to persuade another child. After a long moment, Charlotte slowly opened her mouth. And no, love." Silas was stunned for a moment, then his eyes crinkled in a smile. "That's right, he doesn't love you. I'm the only one who truly loves you." A flicker of something crossed Charlotte's eyes, but her expression remained blank. With a loud bang, the door to the room slammed against the wall. Silas's expression turned cold. He stood up and looked at Ethan, who had just burst in. "You're awake?" Ethan glanced at him, his gaze fixed on Charlotte on the bed. His heart tightened. He strode forward and took Charlotte's hand. "Charlotte, it's me, Ethan Marshall. Look at me." Silas's eyes darkened, his brows furrowed tightly. Charlotte looked up, her emotionless eyes staring at Ethan. Seeing those once bright eyes now so dim and lifeless, Ethan felt as if his heart were being torn apart. Perhaps this was all his fault. Before Silas could intervene, Charlotte's slender hand trembled, and she pulled it away from Ethan's grasp. She lowered her head and shifted further into the bed, away from him. Chapter 38. Charlotte Hayes' simple actions struck Ethan Marshall like a bolt of lightning. He stared, frozen in place. She was rejecting him. Silas Thorne saw this and couldn't help but sneer. "Charlotte's consciousness is weak, she can't recognize people, yet she still rejected you." He took a deep breath and sighed with mock pity. "Ethan, do you still want to take her away?" But Ethan didn't seem to hear him. His eyes reddened, and he felt a suffocating lump in his throat. Even though Charlotte had little awareness, or perhaps didn't recognize him at all, she still instinctively moved away from him. Did she really not love him anymore? Ethan's vision blurred. He found himself wishing he had never regained his memory. It might have been easier. He had forbidden Charlotte from leaving anything of hers in the house, but he had kept the ring. Seeing the undisguised pain in Ethan's eyes, Silas said, "I'll tell you the truth. I never touched Charlotte, and that baby wasn't mine." At his words, Ethan turned to him, the tears in his eyes instantly replaced by a towering rage. "I thought you trusted her," Silas sneered. Ethan grabbed Silas by the collar, the hatred in his eyes so intense it looked as if it could tear him apart. "If you hadn't used your despicable tricks to drive us apart, we wouldn't be in this situation today. This is all your own fault," Silas said coldly. "Search your heart. Didn't you marry her for revenge?" His gaze shifted to Charlotte. "Look at her now. Don't you feel any satisfaction from your successful revenge?" Bastard, unable to hold back any longer, Ethan punched Silas in the face. However, the scream didn't come from Silas but from Charlotte. She clutched the blanket, curled into a trembling ball, her eyes filled with terror. "Charlotte?" Ethan murmured, regretting his impulsive action in front of her. Ignoring the pain, Silas rushed to the other side of the bed and pulled Charlotte into his arms. Don't be afraid," he said softly, gently patting her back. Charlotte, as if finding a safe haven, rested her face on Silas's shoulder and refused to look at Ethan again. Watching this scene, Ethan's hands, hanging at his sides, trembled violently. All his anger seemed to vanish in an instant, replaced by a profound bitterness and stinging pain. Perhaps to the current Charlotte, he was a stranger. Or worse, a stranger who brought back many bad memories. Ethan gave a self-deprecating laugh, turned, and dejectedly left the room. Silas watched him go, his brow furrowed tightly. Eleanor Marshall came looking for Ethan and found him leaning against the window at the end of the hallway, staring blankly outside. "Ethan?" Eleanor walked over, but when she saw his red eyes, she froze. "What are you crying about?" "Mom." Ethan turned, his face weary. "You should go home, I want to stay here a little longer." At his words, Eleanor's face fell. "Stay for what? Charlotte is about to—" "Enough," Ethan roared. "She did nothing to betray me, that baby was mine." Each word was like a carving knife slicing into his heart. In their years of entanglement, Silas wasn't the only one at fault. He was too. And Charlotte had silently endured it all for so long. Outside the hospital, Vincent Hayes stared at the window of Charlotte's room, his mind in turmoil. In the end, family ties lost to fear. If he couldn't pay back the money, he would be homeless and probably beaten up as well. "Sis, don't blame me," Vincent muttered to himself. "You've always been good to me. Just think of this as the last thing you do for me." Chapter 39. The next day. Silas Thorne arrived at the hospital room with a freshly made nutritious porridge, only to find Ethan Marshall sitting by the bedside. His eyes were bloodshot, with dark circles underneath, a clear sign he hadn't slept all night. Charlotte was still asleep. Silas didn't say anything, but his eyes were filled with displeasure. Ethan stood up, reluctantly tearing his gaze away from Charlotte. He glanced at Silas and quietly left the room. Silas frowned slightly, put down the insulated container, and followed him out. "What do you want to say?" Silas leaned against the wall, adopting the posture of a victor. For once, Ethan didn't argue with him. He looked at Silas, his tone calm. "Give me 1 month." Silas narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean? Give me 1 month to be with Charlotte." Ethan forced a difficult smile. "After 1 month, I will divorce her. From then on, I will never appear before her again." Hearing this, Silas was stunned. He didn't believe Ethan would give up so easily. Ethan looked up, as if seeing through Silas's thoughts, and said with a cold taunt, "Don't think you're completely blameless. You knew she didn't love you. If it weren't for you, she and I would have been better off." Silas's jaw tightened. Those words had indeed struck a nerve. He knew Charlotte didn't love him, but he also believed Ethan didn't love her enough, which was why he had resorted to those tactics. "Are you serious?" Silas asked, half convinced. Ethan nodded. 1 month from now would be their 4th wedding anniversary. Silas left the hospital, giving Ethan his last month. In the hospital room, Charlotte's eyes were still closed, but her slightly chapped lips began to smack. Ethan immediately poured a glass of warm water and, using a small spoon, brought a spoonful to her lips. But the water went down the wrong way, and Charlotte started coughing uncontrollably. Ethan's heart jumped. He quickly put down the glass, gently helped her sit up, and let her lean against him. "Charlotte," he called softly a few times. As he held her, he realized how much weight she had lost. He suppressed the pain in his heart and watched as she slowly opened her eyes. Her innocent eyes were filled with confusion, and she stared at him blankly. Her baby-like babbling made Ethan pause. It seemed Charlotte had forgotten her rejection of him yesterday. A flicker of joy appeared in Ethan's eyes. "Are you hungry? We'll eat after you wash your face and brush your teeth." After helping Charlotte brush her teeth and wash her face, Ethan's sleeve was soaked, but he didn't care at all. In fact, he cherished the opportunity to take care of her. Watching Charlotte eat, bite by bite, Ethan's heart, which should have been happy, felt a pang of sadness. His eyes reddened. His hesitant hand froze for a long moment before he finally reached out to stroke her face. It had only been half a day, but the reluctance in his heart already made it impossible for him to let go. "Charlotte, will you ever think of me, even just by chance in the future?" Ethan asked, his voice choked with emotion. Charlotte, still chewing the food in her mouth, tilted her head, looking lost in thought. Ethan couldn't help but laugh at himself. He knew she couldn't understand, probably hadn't even heard him, but he still asked. Just then, a nurse came in with a medicine cart. Ethan pressed his lips together and suddenly asked, "Can she go for a walk outside the hospital now?" The nurse replied, "Yes, but try not to stay out for too long." At her words, Ethan's eyes lit up as if he had made a decision. After the nurse left, Ethan dressed Charlotte in a thick coat and gently lifted her from the bed. "Charlotte." He knelt in front of the wheelchair, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm going to take you for a walk downstairs. In a couple of days, we'll go somewhere else." Chapter 40. Cherry Blossom Avenue. It wasn't the season for cherry blossoms, so there were few pedestrians on the road. Ethan Marshall glanced at an elderly couple walking arm in arm in the distance, his eyes downcast. "Charlotte," he knelt down and zipped up her coat a little higher. Fighting back the sting in his nose, Ethan smiled through reddened eyes. This used to be your favorite place to come. Do you remember? A leaf drifted down and landed on Charlotte's head. Her eyelashes trembled, and she slowly looked up. The view was of cherry trees with only a few leaves left, lining the straight road that stretched into the distance. The slightly glaring sunlight shone through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on Charlotte's pale face. Her pursed lips moved, parting slightly. Flower, the tiny sound made Ethan freeze. Was Charlotte saying flower? Did she know there were flowers here? Yes, cherry blossoms will bloom here. In April, it will be very beautiful, Ethan said, his voice choked with emotion. He reached out, took the leaf from her hair, and placed it in her hand. Charlotte looked at it for a moment, then her eyelashes drooped as if she had lost interest. She tilted her head, leaned back in her chair, and stared blankly at the leaf in her hand. Ethan sat beside her, watching her with a deep, somber gaze. This quiet, beautiful scene was an eyesore to Vincent Hayes. He stood behind a tree, scowling at Ethan. He had been watching for days but hadn't found an opportunity. Sela's thorn at least went home occasionally, but Ethan was glued to Charlotte's side, never letting her out of his sight. Vincent glanced at the calendar on his phone, his anxiety mounting. If this dragged on any longer, he would owe more than $500,000. After waiting for another half an hour and seeing Ethan and Charlotte still sitting there, Vincent cursed under his breath and resentfully went home. But as soon as he got back and listened to his mother's nagging, he received a call from Sela's. Vincent's heart pounded, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Sela's hadn't contacted him for a few days, and he had thought the incident at the hospital was over. "Hello, Sela's," Vincent greeted him timidly. Sela's tone was no different from usual. "What have you been up to lately?" "Not much, just looking for some work," he stammered in reply. "Is that so? Do you find the current apartment to your liking?" Sela's asked out of the blue. A hint of confusion crossed Vincent's face. "It's great, Mom and I both like it a lot." As he spoke, sweat continued to bead on his forehead. If he really couldn't pay back the money, he would have to give up the house, and Sela's had just given it to him. "Good that you like it," Sela's said, and then hung up. Vincent frowned, not understanding what Sela's meant. Just a minute later, the front door suddenly opened. Brenda Hayes stared in surprise at the middle-aged man who walked in as if he owned the place. "Who are you?" "I'm the owner of this place." The man glanced at her. Vincent came out of his bedroom, about to ask what was going on, when Kingpin Wallace arrived with his men. "Kingpin Wallace?" he said with a forced laugh, a growing sense of unease creeping into his heart. Kingpin Wallace got straight to the point. "I'm here for the money, now. Didn't you say 1 month?" Vincent was completely stunned. "I changed my mind." Kingpin Wallace crossed his arms and looked at him with contempt. "No money, then the house will cover the debt." Hearing this, Brenda burst into tears. "No, this house is all we have left. Wait, who said this house is yours?" The self-proclaimed owner said, waving the property deed in his hand. "I just bought this house." Chapter 41. Seeing the property deed in the man's hand, Vincent Hayes's face turned pale. "Mom, where's our deed?" He grabbed his mother's arm, terrified. Brenda was in tears. Didn't you have the deed?" Back then, Sela's Thorne had told her he had an empty 3-bedroom apartment and suggested she and Vincent move in. She had immediately sold their old house in the countryside. She had assumed Vincent had the deed. Hearing his mother's words, Vincent froze completely. The commotion downstairs attracted the attention of neighbors, who poked their heads out of their balconies and windows to see what was happening. A bruised and swollen Vincent was pushed violently to the ground. Brenda threw herself over him, crying, "Don't hit him, please stop. I'm telling you, if you don't pay up within 7 days, it won't just be a beating." Kingpin Wallace warned him fiercely before leaving with his men. Brenda felt her pocket and cried out, my card is still in there. Mom, don't bother." Vincent wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and staggered to his feet. "That man won't open the door." He finally understood. This was all a trap set by Sela's, and the purpose was simply for Charlotte. Vincent's eyes were bloodshot, filled with a deep-seated hatred. He took Charlotte's insurance policy out of his pocket, the murderous intent in his heart growing stronger. "Sis, don't blame me. You all forced me to do this," he murmured. Hospital. Ethan Marshall carried Charlotte to the hospital bed, covered her with a blanket, and gently stroked her dark hair. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Charlotte didn't speak, playfully biting her lower lip. Seeing her childlike behavior, Ethan's heart grew heavier. He sat down beside her, took out his phone, and opened his long-neglected social media account. He was no longer a trending topic. He had lost nearly 1 million followers. His private messages were a mix of insults and encouragement. At that moment, Ethan felt a pang of regret. He turned to look at Charlotte, a mist forming in his eyes. He had forgotten why he had entered the entertainment industry in the first place. It was because in this world, the Charlotte on the outside could never catch up to him. Just then, Charlotte's hand slowly, stiffly lifted. As Ethan watched in stunned silence, her slender hand gently rested on the back of his. Ethan's pupils constricted. "Charlotte?" Charlotte's gaze wasn't on him, but tears suddenly fell from her obsidian-like eyes. She didn't blink, her half-closed eyes shimmering with moisture. Ethan held his breath. He took her hand, his excitement palpable. "Do you understand what I'm saying? Charlotte, you can understand, can't you?" Charlotte continued to stare at the blanket. Apart from the tears streaming down her face, her expression was no different than usual. Ethan called for a doctor, but the doctor said it was just an unconscious physiological reaction. However, he didn't think so. He believed Charlotte understood. "Charlotte, do you think I shouldn't have told Silas that we could only be together for a month?" Ethan gently wiped her tears, his heart trembling. "How could I ever let you go?" Night fell. Ethan watched Charlotte's sleeping face, his gaze slowly moving down to her right hand. He got up, quietly left the room, and took out his phone to call Laura Norton. "Laura," Laura's voice was full of surprise. "Ethan, you've got your memory back." "Yes." Ethan walked to the window at the end of the hallway and said slowly, "Can you do me a favor?" "What is it?" "Just ask." He looked at the colorful neon lights in the distance, a lump in his throat. "Can you bring me the ring I left at home?" Chapter 42, The sunshine from yesterday didn't last. Ethan Marshall looked at the gloomy sky, a sense of unease settling in his heart. Charlotte Hayes had her head tilted up, staring out the window. "Do you want to go outside?" Ethan asked softly. At his words, Charlotte blinked and twisted her lips. "Ah." Knowing she couldn't express herself, Ethan stroked her face. "Then let's go down for half an hour." Outside the inpatient building, there were quite a few patients out for a walk, along with their accompanying nurses. Charlotte sat in her wheelchair, leaning against the backrest as if dozing off. Ethan held a comb and gently brushed her long, dark hair. "Charlotte, in the future, can you not let Silas Thorne comb your hair?" After saying it, he couldn't help but laugh, though his eyes were filled with a bitter sadness. When he first met Charlotte, she had a bob. She said long hair was too hard to manage. Later, he told her she looked more beautiful with long hair and she never cut it again. Ethan's eyes stung, and tears almost fell. Suddenly, his phone rang. He placed the comb in Charlotte's hand and took out his phone. "Laura." "Ethan, I'm almost there, but I have something to do at the office. Wait for me at the hospital entrance. I'll give you the thing and head back." Ethan frowned slightly. "All right." After hanging up, he looked at Charlotte, feeling a bit uneasy. He hadn't left her side for a single moment all these days, even though the hospital was relatively safe. Ethan had no choice but to ask a nurse who was attending to another patient to keep an eye on her for a moment. Then he ran to the hospital entrance. 2 or 3 minutes later, Laura Norton's car approached. Laura noticed how haggard he looked but didn't say anything. She handed him the ring box. "So, are you two getting back together?" At her words, Ethan gave a bitter smile. "Thank you, this was a lot of trouble." Laura pressed her lips together and sighed. "Don't mention it. Just be good to each other." With that, the window rolled up and she drove away. Ethan opened the box, his feelings a mix of reluctance and anticipation. If Charlotte had gotten used to his constant companionship, would her subconscious also be unwilling to let him go? With these complicated feelings, Ethan walked back toward the inpatient building. But as he scanned the area, Charlotte, in her wheelchair, was gone. His heart sank. He ran over, looking around frantically, but still couldn't see her. As he searched, his gaze suddenly fell on the wooden comb that should have been in Charlotte's hand. Ethan's eyes widened. He walked over and picked it up. The comb had fallen at least 10 feet away from where the wheelchair had been. "Nurse, where's my wife?" Ethan clutched the comb, his voice sharp with urgency. The nurse was also stunned. She was right here just a moment ago." Vincent Hayes pushed the wheelchair all the way to the busiest intersection. The road led directly to a crosswalk and was on a slight downward slope. If the light turned red, the wheelchair would shoot out, and drivers wouldn't have time to react. That was exactly the effect he wanted. Wearing a mask and a hat, Vincent knelt in front of Charlotte, his voice hoarse. "Sis, do you still recognize me? It's Vincent." Charlotte was slumped to the side, her expression vacant. Perhaps it had been many years since he had looked at his sister so closely. Vincent's eyes suddenly reddened. His mind was filled with the grim reality of not being able to pay back his debts, but his heart was flooded with memories of his childhood with Charlotte. He had been selfish and mischievous, and whenever he did something wrong, Charlotte would take the blame, but she never once resented him. When he had accidentally fallen into the reservoir, she had jumped in without hesitation to save him, nearly drowning herself in the process. When they got home, their mother had blamed her for not taking care of her younger brother and made her kneel in the yard, soaking wet, for 2 hours. Tears fell uncontrollably. Vincent sobbed, burying his face in Charlotte's lap. "Sis, just help me one last time. You won't feel any pain." Chapter 43. Vincent Hayes lifted his head, taking one last, deep look at Charlotte Hayes. He stood up, his eyes fixed on the numbers on the traffic signal, counting down in his mind. 10, 9, 8. When the pedestrian light turned green, he let go. The wheelchair, with Charlotte in it, shot toward the crosswalk like it was out of control. Vincent turned his back, clutching the insurance policy in his pocket, and ran. After a piercing screech of brakes, followed by a loud thud, his steps faltered. Vincent forced himself not to look back, gritted his teeth, and started running again. The traffic was heavy, but there were few pedestrians. Only a handful of people stood by, their faces grim, staring at the person lying in a pool of blood in the middle of the road. The driver was in complete shock. He had no idea where the woman had come from. Ethan Marshall, who had been following directions from passers-by, arrived at the scene. When he saw what was in front of him, his heart felt like it had stopped beating. Charlotte was wearing a hospital gown, and blood was pouring from her mouth and nose. A corner of the light blue blanket was stained red with blood. Her frail body twitched uncontrollably, but her expression was vacant, as if she couldn't feel any pain at all. Charlotte, a heart-wrenching scream startled the driver and the onlookers. Ethan ran over like a man possessed and knelt beside Charlotte. Her recently combed dark hair was matted with blood, and a thin stream of blood flowed slowly from the tips of her hair. Charlotte, blood stained Ethan's vision, but his face was deathly pale. He wanted to help her up, but he was afraid of causing more harm. Charlotte's fingers twitched slightly, her half-closed eyelashes trembled. She was fading fast. An ambulance siren wailed in the distance, its piercing sound drawing a few more glances from pedestrians. Ethan clutched Charlotte's hand, his bloodshot eyes filled with terror. Charlotte, hold on. I'm here, I'm right here." Despite his words, the paramedic performing emergency aid had a grim expression. Ethan's hand trembled like a leaf. His mind was so blank he could barely think. The only thing that made him feel alive was the agonizing pain in his heart. He hadn't been able to save Charlotte. He hadn't been able to save her. By the time they reached the hospital, the gurney was soaked in blood. Outside the emergency room, a nurse had to forcibly pull Ethan's hand away before they could push Charlotte inside. Ethan stared at the white walls, his vision going black, and he collapsed to the floor. He stared blankly at the blood on his shirt, feeling as if an invisible hand were squeezing his throat, making it impossible to breathe. Charlotte? Tears welled up in his sore eyes as he repeated her name over and over. He wanted to tell himself she would be okay, to tell himself that even if they were to be separated, they still had half a month left. It couldn't be now running all the way back to the old, run-down apartment they used to live in. Vincent collapsed to his knees as soon as he entered. His mother, Brenda, her face weary, saw him and no longer had the energy to care. She kept thinking, was this all her punishment? "Mom," Vincent said, his voice hoarse, I killed my sister." At his words, Brenda's eyes widened. "What did you say?" Vincent looked at her and suddenly started laughing. He laughed until he couldn't control himself, and then he broke into loud sobs. Because of his greed, he had killed Charlotte. He had killed the sister who had been good to him for over 20 years. Brenda started to cry in panic. She grabbed his shoulders and slapped him across the face. "What nonsense are you talking?" Vincent didn't say another word, just laughed and cried like a madman. Outside the emergency room, the door opened. Ethan scrambled to his feet. "Doctor, how is she? Is she okay?" The doctor took off his mask and sighed. "I'm sorry, we did everything we could." Chapter 44. The words, "We did everything we could," exploded in Ethan Marshall's mind like a clap of thunder. What did you say?" he asked, his constricted pupils trembling, each word laced with the agony of a shattered heart. The doctor frowned. "The patient doesn't have much time left. If you have anything to say, you should say it now." The mixture of disinfectant and blood was pungent, but to Ethan, it smelled like death. The blood on her face had been wiped clean, but her once rosy cheeks were as pale as paper. Charlotte Hayes lay quietly on the operating table, her chest rising and falling faintly, her eyes half open. The green line on the heart monitor beside her looked as if it could flatline at any moment. Ethan walked forward stiffly, his heavy right leg slowly bending as he knelt, his pain-filled eyes fixed on her. "Charlotte." In just half an hour, his voice had become as hoarse as that of a man in his 70s. He felt as if every breath he took pulled on a raw nerve. His already numb heart was beating even more faintly than Charlotte's. Taking her hand, which still held a trace of warmth, Ethan reached out and caressed her face. "Should I say I'm sorry, or I love you?" he whispered in her ear, his voice choked with emotion. He had acted in scenes of life and death, his restrained, heart-wrenching performances moving audiences to tears. But now, he was unnaturally calm. He wanted to cry, but he didn't have the strength. All he could think about was what else he needed to tell Charlotte, so that she would remember him when she was gone. The beeping of the heart monitor was like a countdown to the end of Charlotte's life, filling Ethan with terror. A hot tear fell into her blood-soaked dark hair. His voice trembled. "If you see our child, can you tell him I'm sorry for me?" Charlotte's eyelashes fluttered, as if in response, or perhaps it was a final struggle. Ethan held back his tears and pain and began to softly sing the song he had written for her. Line by line, his voice was no longer as clear as it once was, nor did it hold the sweetness of new love. Each word was filled with a loving concern. His hoarse singing echoed in the operating room. Ethan sang on, his voice gradually trembling. He didn't stop until he finished the last line, "To wander with you to the ends of the earth." A faint squeeze in his palm made his heart stop. Charlotte's gaze slowly faded. Her slightly parted lips seemed to form one last sound before slowly closing. "Charlotte!" Ethan whispered her name again, watching as her eyes slowly closed. The feeling of her hand squeezing his faded away. "Beep!" The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was replaced by a long, piercing tone. The last breath of the person on the bed was gone. Ethan let go of her hand. He took the ring from his pocket and gently slipped it onto her now cooling ring finger. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been custom-made for her. He took a deep breath, closed his tear-filled eyes, and leaned down to place a kiss on her lips. "Goodbye, Charlotte." The next day, Silas Thorne, having received the news, rushed over. Without a word, he raised his hand and punched Ethan. Ethan didn't dodge. He fell heavily to the ground. Laura Norton, who had arrived earlier, quickly intervened. "What are you doing?" "Ethan Marshall." Silas's eyes were red as he pointed at Ethan and raged. "1 month, you said 1 month, but it's been less than half a month." He pushed Laura away like a madman and grabbed Ethan by the collar. "Only half a month, and the person I cherished most is gone because of you." Ethan looked up, his lifeless expression making him seem like a walking corpse. Silas glared at him, wishing he could die in Charlotte's place. He regretted it. He shouldn't have agreed to Ethan's request. If he hadn't, Charlotte would surely not have met this fate. Chapter 45. Laura Norton pulled Silas Thorne away, reasoning, "You can't blame Ethan for this if it were you. You couldn't have stopped Vincent Hayes either." At her words, Silas froze. "What did you say?" "The police have already arrested Vincent," Laura explained. "He took out a loan from a loan shark and couldn't pay it back. Charlotte had a life insurance policy." At the mention of Charlotte, her eyes welled up. He wanted to fake her accidental death to get the insurance money and pay off his debts. Silas's eyes widened in shock. He had forgotten. He had forgotten that Vincent had Charlotte's insurance policy. If that was the case, then he was the one who had cut off Vincent's last resort, forcing him to target Charlotte. Silas looked at Ethan, his heart pierced with pain. He finally understood. In this world, both he and Ethan had loved Charlotte deeply, but together they had pushed her into hell. Silas slumped against the wall, his hands covering his eyes, swallowing all his regret and tears. Charlotte's funeral was simple. Only Ethan, Silas, Laura, and Alina Marshall were there. Alina didn't say a word the entire time, but she kept secretly wiping away tears. Ethan looked at the photo on the tombstone, his bloodshot eyes filled with affection. "I'll come see you every day from now on. No matter how late, I'll be here, so don't be afraid." Silas's expression darkened, but he said nothing more. After the four of them left, Brenda Hayes, her hair now completely white, shakily approached the grave. She fell to her knees with a thud, beating her chest and wailing, "Charlotte, Mom is so sorry. Mom and Vincent are both so sorry." Every word was filled with shame and regret. With Charlotte gone and Vincent sentenced to 25 years in prison, she was utterly alone. But she knew this was the punishment she deserved. The villa. Alina watched Ethan's desolate figure, wanting to say something to comfort him, but her throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. In the end, she sighed and left. In his current state, Ethan wouldn't listen to anything she said. In the silent living room, Ethan's eyes scanned the space. He could almost hear Charlotte calling his name. But there was nothing in the entire house that was connected to her, because he had been the one to throw her out. Ethan walked slowly to the sofa and sat down. He took out his repaired phone. He opened the last text message Charlotte had sent him. "If I disappeared, would you be happy?" A sharp pain shot through Ethan's heart. With a trembling finger, he typed out the word no and sent it. A few seconds later, a red exclamation mark appeared next to the word. His dry eyes burned. He opened his photo album, and Charlotte's face appeared again. His emotions and tears found their release. Ethan clutched the phone tightly and began to sob uncontrollably. This was the only connection to her he had left. Not long after, the management company officially terminated its contract with Ethan Marshall. Thanks to Silas's public statement and the call recordings on Ethan's phone, the truth about his and Charlotte's story became clear. Silas moved abroad. Ethan quit acting and started working behind the scenes. In another interview, the host asked him why he no longer acted. Ethan thought of Charlotte and gave a bitter smile. "Because I've lived it, everything else feels fake. I can't act anymore." Laura told Ethan that Vincent was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As for Brenda, she was placed in a nursing home and was showing early signs of dementia. After that, there was always a fresh daisy in front of Charlotte's grave, and someone would always be sitting there, singing a song. Many years later, the daisies were gone and the singer was no longer there. But next to her grave, there was a new tombstone. His name was Ethan Marshall. The end.